that unless they come to what is called with clean hands, come to equity. Those who come with equity must come with clean hands. It is not that I take pleasure in seeing that the supplementary bills coming now, but at the same time to give the public out there the impression that this government has made such great breach and not accountable, not being transparent, but yet in 10 years, not a single supplementary appropriation came to this House. And let me tell you what is worse, Mr. Speaker, because I remember in opposition in a debate, I pointed this out. In the 10 years, there was over $1.5 billion borrowed by the government, and only one loan was brought to the Parliament, one, and that was the loan to buy the shares of Liat. Now, Mr. Speaker, the Constitution of Antigua and Barbuda provides for supplementary appropriation, and for good reason. What would have happened if we didn't have the legal mechanism in place to spend money that was not anticipated? How would we have responded to the Barbuda crisis when Irma destroyed Barbuda, Mr. Speaker? How would we have spent money? We would have to come back to Parliament and pass a law. But the wise men in the past who designed our Constitution, and it's in all legislatures, all, whether you go to Congress, you go to the United Kingdom or United States, there is this mechanism in law. And let me give you what is defined as a supplementary appropriation. A supplementary appropriation is an appropriation enacted subsequent to a regular annual appropriation act when need for the fund is too urgent to be postponed until next regular annual appropriation act. The public out there is under the impression that the supplementary appropriation is being driven by a desire for government to spend money irresponsibly. That is the impression being given out there. But when we have situations, for instance, Mr. Speaker, like a pandemic, in 2019, after we would have gone to Parliament and passed the supplementary appropriation, in 2021, when the annual estimates came to Parliament and the Appropriation Act was passed, who could have anticipated the change in Antigua and Barbuda, the change in the world, for us to begin to look at responding to an emergency? We had situations, just as an example, Mr. Speaker, where when the chain of the supply chain was interrupted, we had ordered some oxygen generators out of the United States. When people were in the hospital and we had a challenge supplying oxygen, so we decided to buy some machines. When we made the order, the supplier confirmed our order, gave us a shipping date when the machines would arrive in Antigua and Barbuda, and guess what happened? The United States government put an embargo on the generators. No oxygen generators must leave the United States. We had already paid our money. That was money that was not appropriated for, because we did not anticipate, and nobody anticipated that there would have been a pandemic. In 2020, we had to decide to expand the facilities to house COVID patients. And so we had to spend money that was not appropriated for. So what must the government do? Not respond to the emergency? And this is what the supplementary appropriation, and I am making these points because the public must understand the law. They must understand how governments work and not be fooled by the other side, you know. Everything is wrong. Your supplementary appropriation, if you can find money, and listen to the point, listen to the point. If you can find money to respond to an emergency, you can find money to pay overtime. So when we were faced with the potential short of oxygen in Antigua, and by the way, many countries ran out of oxygen, Mr. Speaker, and people died. In Antigua, when we saw that as a possibility, the Prime Minister made a call and ordered over 300 cylinders of oxygen to be stored in Antigua so that Antiguans would never run out of oxygen. And you know how much that cost, Mr. Speaker? $500,000. Unbudgeted. That is the point. Unbudgeted. And so the impression out there, oh, you get, and let me make this point. Notwithstanding the fact that the revenue of this government plummeted, this government never laid off a single person from their payroll. Not a single person lost a job. Isn't that something that is highly commendable? Isn't that something that even the opposition should be talking about and show some appreciation to the government? And let me say, the greatest stimulus in any country is a paycheck. The greatest stimulus in any country is a paycheck. You hear they're talking about, oh, people want stimulus, you should give them $500 and $100 and all this thing. Have they watched what has transpired in the United States that went to their Congress and passed money to be doled out? Did not improve the situation. Did not improve the situation. We cannot go down a road where we continue to miseducate our people about governance. You cannot say that when you get into government, and that is not going to happen, that in 100 days you will give every mother in this country enough money for them to feed the children if the father is not taking care of the children. Let me tell you something, Mr. Speaker. Exactly. And let me say, this is not a pleasant thing to say. We could design policies that appear to be helpful to our own people, but destroy the culture. And what we are taught from the time years ago, in order to make your way through life, you must decide to work. You want to build a welfare state. And Mr. Speaker, as hard as it is for this government to do it right, we must continue to do it right. The most dangerous thing you could do in undermining your development in any country is to create an expectation of entitlement even when you do not work. Yep. We have to speak out about that. Absolutely. I'm seeing that creeping up. in our society. We are not going to leave anybody behind. One of the pieces of legislation that is a remarkable piece of legislation that we have passed in this House is the one that the Minister of Social Transformation will amend. The Social Protection Act. And you have to ask yourself a question. If a man doesn't step up to his responsibility of taking care of his child, would a Social Protection Act change that behavior? So instead of education, instead of providing an incentive for people to begin to say, I'm going to step up and meet my responsibilities, you're saying, if you don't meet your responsibilities, the government will take it over. The business community should be concerned, because the only way you can continue to develop people economically and socially is through the expansion of the economy, not the expansion of handouts. People must work. They must work, and we must work to expand the economy to provide jobs. The quick fixes they're talking about to attract votes is the most dangerous thing and the thing that can undermine the development of this country. And I hear it from time to time. The people of this country must appreciate that when the cruise ships don't come, there are no taxes. When they wanted us to close down the country, and you recall that, we were criticized when we opened the country in June of 2020. Oh, you're risking your lot too much money. As a matter of fact, they said that the Prime Minister lost too much money opening up the economy. And Mr. Speaker, no country that delayed in opening up the economy ended up with a better results on COVID than Antigua and Barbuda. None. So we decided that we will balance the risk and manage the risk. And I'm telling you, it takes skill and experience to manage risk. I see you all put a team out there, that team can't manage no risk.
That's a risk.
That is bringing a risk on Antigua and Barbuda. That will set us back. So, Mr. Speaker, let me say that the law we passed, the amendment we made this morning, dealing with the raising revenue for our university, income tax act that we amended. This is the type of discussion we need to have in Antigua when we talk about the development. And look at what this government is doing right now. Right now, this government has established a policy for every community to have early childhood education. I want to show you how you build a society. So notwithstanding the challenges of low-income people, what the government is saying, every child must have equal opportunity for an early start. Every child. Right now, it is skewed in Antigua and Barbuda, let us be honest. The middle and upper income communities have early childhood education spread across this country. Where it's lacking is in the rural areas and the low income or middle, working class. And we're going to fix that. That's how you fix, that's how you fight poverty and the results of poverty. Not by promising people handouts, and you know it's not going to be possible. And then we see the expansion of the primary and secondary education plans. By the way, Mr. Speaker and Mr. Prime Minister, I think we must help our people to understand the policies of really progressing a nation. You take, for instance, when this government, to the leadership of the members of St. John City West, decided that instead of a primary school, we're going to focus on a university. Now, what you have just done, that policy has just done, is to say, rather than looking at a small community, let us look at the benefits of the whole nation. So the opponents of the policy never envisaged that after the university would have started and the development progressed, that we could always build a primary school, which is happening right now, and a secondary school. Reflect on that. We now have a university. We now have a university. And let me say, Mr. Speaker, absolutely. Let me say this. For the very first time as a parliamentarian, I now see within my constituency young women in particular stepping forward and say, I want a university education. That would never have happened without the Five Island University, because they would not project their minds beyond the water and the shores of Antigua and Barbuda. And that was opposed, as you all opposed the education levy. And what is happening, Mr. Speaker, we must not allow the United Progressive Party to dumb down this society. That must stop. If they want to debate, we'll take on the debate. Let ideas contend. But when the member for All Saints East and St. Luke comes here, and he says to the people of Antigua and Barbuda, oh, solid waste, oh, you solid waste find money, the government can find money to do every other thing, but not to pay solid waste. Let me tell you something. When this government was elected in 2014, we didn't have over 300 independent contractors at solid waste. We had solid waste work being done by a handful of businessmen who already had businesses. That is what happened, Mr. Speaker. A handful under the UPP. Businessmen who already have established big business. They were having contracts to cut the side of the roads. And they're selling this, they're selling that, but they cut the side of the roads. This government changed the policy and say we want to create young businessmen at solid waste. What you have for the first time is several young businessmen, only because of the reduction in revenue, why we are not able to do pay as often as we ought to or would like to. But that is being corrected. But to look at the program and say that the government doesn't care, doesn't understand the benefits of starting our young men in particular to think business. Many of them are in business. They buy the equipment. As soon as the economy perks up again and we start to get revenue, we'll meet all their debts. But they would not have had the opportunity if we didn't change the policy. You know about that. You've been around since 2009 with your contract. Member for All Saints East and St. Luke's. And you're benefited from the government policy. You're benefited. And let me say this, Mr. Speaker. When the member for All Saints East and St. Luke's bragged this morning about, he cleaned up fries. And, and making the point that the government is not doing its work. There's no such thing. Since I went to lunch, I consulted the general manager, who is your friend, and maybe more than that. He confirmed to me that he sent his team down Fries to clean up Fries. You contributed an excavator, but we provided the fuel for the excavator. But you didn't say that this morning. You didn't say that this morning, and this is the problem. You gave the country the impression that you went down there with your excavator and cleaned up Fries. Yeah? You gave the impression that you did, but you contributed an excavator, and we had the backhoes. Yes. You heard him this morning, and this is the thing that happened. If you wanted to contribute, buy the fuel too. No, you didn't have to do it. You didn't have to do it. I am saying that listen, the point is that the government decided, Mr. Speaker, and I am telling you that the question was asked of me as the minister, are you going to clean up Fries? And I say, absolutely, we have to clean it up so both venues can be comfortable for both parties. And we sent the team there to clean it up. He gave him the impression that he went down there and did all the work. And even the excavator, he said, want the fuel in his tank? And we provided the fuel.
Mr. Speaker, a point of elucidation, Mr. Speaker.
No.
Elucidation.
So, Mr. Speaker, no.
Mr. Speaker, the member is misleading the public. And
no.
But Mr. Speaker, I want to.
You mislead the public. I'm just correcting Mr. Speaker. This morning, and this is supplementary appropriation, so it gives me a kind of latitude. This morning, a question asked the Prime Minister about that elicited some information. This is when some member of the opposition on the social media indicated that the government spent, what, $2 million for water trucks? Each fire truck. $2 million US for each fire truck. And the gentleman, and by the way, you know, I want to make an observation here. We are talking about a former member of parliament that was held in high esteem in this country. And the same gentleman, Mr. Speaker, who presented himself to the Prime Minister's office as the businessman, came to my office already before.
As a businessman too?
As a businessman. And I show you the difference, the way ministers should behave. He offered, and I have evidence because I brought a member of my team to listen. He offered to donate 10 ambulances to the Ministry of Health. If he were to get waiver of environmental levy for some 20 cars. So I said, it is relevant. Don't tell me what's relevant. It's relevant. It's relevant. So I said, I don't understand the math. Because when I look at the levy benefits and 10 ambulances, I said, man, you haven't worked out this math. If you say one ambulance, maybe, but 10. And then I told him that obviously this is not something that can be entertained by me or the ministry, and the story gone. Now, How is it a former minister could have believed? How could a former minister believe that there's a businessman who could have raised the funds to buy, what, how many? 2 or 3 million US to buy 20 fire trucks. And you know, the reason why I dwell on this, you see, because it appears that the new politics in Antigua and Barbuda is to use social media to bamboozle the people of Antigua and Barbuda, and that is something that is of concern. If we want to work for the development of Antigua and Barbuda, we must do so on the basis of facts, and we must not try to deceive the people. So the people, and people believe from time to time, believe it. Yes, they believe. And that is the problem. I want to improve, you remember on both sides, there is a price to pay. The people who are supporting you, you must be fair to them. You must respect the ability to reason. When you lie to a citizen, you're saying you don't have the ability to reason. And you must trust your people that if they have the facts, they can reason what is good for them. But to purposely lie to them, and I know it is painful when I go around and they tell some stories that they believe. There was a particular lady from Jennings who came to my office, and she laid out a series of things that she heard on the radio. The most outrageous things. Mr. Speaker, she believed. And I had to sit her down and try to help her, reason the thing logically. And then at the end of it, she said to me, I can't believe them people so lie. Mr. Speaker.
I get that all the time.
Yes, Mr. I wrap up right now, Mr. Speaker. So the whole issue here right now, Mr. Speaker, is that the government of Antigua and Barbuda, this government, has done what no other governments have done, because I've done my research. This government right now is the most up-to-date government ever in bringing supplementary appropriation to this House. There's been no government that is just 2 years away from being absolutely up. In the UPP, they did not bring any supplementary appropriation for budgets for 2004 to 2014. None. 10 years, none. And after 10 years, Mr. Speaker, and so, Mr. Speaker, after 10 years, you heard the member for the other side. He had the temerity to chastise this government that is, to me, in terms of coming to Parliament, bringing reports to Parliament, there's never been a government so diligent in meeting the requirements of Parliament. So thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do not intend to be long, but I must end by saying I'm very concerned about a political strategy that seemed to be bent on fooling the people in order to get power, deception. I want to say to the people of Antigua and Barbuda, when people lie to you about situations such as politics and other things, is because they don't respect your intelligence and respect your ability to reason. Thank you. Yes, indeed. Yes.
The wrap-up will be very brief. Mr. Speaker, am I acknowledged? Thank you very much, and let me thank the member for St. Mary's North in particular, and he made a very potent point about members on the other side deceiving the public. Now, I believe as parliamentarians, we have a sacred duty to ensure that we act on a trustworthy basis, that the people of this country should be able to believe in what we say. And those who deliberately and routinely undermine the trust of the people by using lies, deceptions, they will certainly pay a price, because as a member for St. Mary's North indicated, they are literally undermining and perhaps maybe underestimating the intelligence of the people of Antigua and Barbuda. And I too have had many individuals who would have come to me with some very outlandish arguments, and after reasoning with them and telling them the truth, they would have become disgusted by the fact that those who they support or may be inclined to support would have deceived them to the extent into believing some monumental lies. Mr. Speaker, the member for Austin Cease and St. Luke started his presentation with a lie. He said that we did not provide the details on the supplementary appropriation. But interestingly, the member for Barbuda was able to quote extensively from those details. So you can see that even in this honorable House, there are acts of deception in order to score cheap political points. Mr. Speaker, the member for Barbuda made a number of statements too that were also based on fabrications, which seems to be perhaps the underpinnings of those who support the BPM and the UPP. Because, for example, Mr. Speaker, the member for Barbuda says that we, that is our government, is subsidizing the government of Montserrat. There's no such thing, and he knows it. The member is well aware that at one point, Fly Montserrat used to provide services to Barbuda. And for that, the government had to pay a subsidy. Prior to that, Mr. Speaker, the UPP administration also paid a subsidy to support flights to Barbuda. So the member for Barbuda may want to correct that assertion. He says he will check. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt that perhaps he spoke out of ignorance. But you know, as parliamentarians, we have a responsibility to verify that the things that we say are factual. He also spoke about the issue of Barbuda Airways. Now, Mr. Speaker, the member for Barbuda is fully aware that we had an arrangement with Caribbean Helicopters in which they would have operated the aircraft on a commercial basis between Antigua and Barbuda, but that company went into liquidation. It means, therefore, that we do not have an operator, a private operator who could partner with the government to operate a commercial entity. It is true that we had to spend over $150,000 to make the aircraft airworthy, but rather than having the aircraft sitting on the tarmac, we decided to turn it over to the Antigua and Barbuda Defense Force to create an air wing so that they can assist us in moving people between Antigua and Barbuda. And the member for Barbuda is fully aware too that since the operationalization of the air wing, that aircraft has actually moved a number of Barbudans who required emergency medical attention. Urgent medical attention. He's fully aware, Mr. Speaker. So that aircraft is actually serving a very significant purpose. It has also transported a number of public officials to and from Barbuda. And again, we are making the best use of the situation because, again, we do not have a commercial operator here who can operate the aircraft. But it was initially bought with the understanding that we would have created Barbuda Airways in partnership with Caribbean Helicopters, which I said earlier is now defunct. So again, that aircraft is servicing Barbuda, and most of the trips that it would have made would have been through, between Antigua and Barbuda. Mr. Speaker, the member also spoke about $23 million that was spent in 2016. The $23 million, Mr. Speaker, were funds that we spent to dredge the harbor and to expand the heritage quay pier, lest we forget, in order to accommodate the Quantum class ships. So, but you see, Mr. Speaker, the member for St. Mary's North, and sorry for pointing out St. Mary's North, but he was pretty extensive with his intervention. He spoke about the purpose of supplementary appropriations, in that they would have captured appropriations that were made in the budget that would have been inadequate. Now, sometimes, Mr. Speaker, a decision could be made, let's say, mid-year, to do a particular project. You would not have budgeted for it, but based on urgency, you had to move, and in order to justify those spending, a supplementary appropriation would have had to have been executed. And that is a similar situation that happened there when we dredged the harbor and extended the heritage keep here. It was done during the course of the year, and we had to do it via supplementary appropriations. So, Speaker, I'll give you another current case in point. We're about to spend about $14 million to rebuild Abyss. There are no budgetary allocations for that spending. The funds will come into the Treasury as a grant, but the spending itself, Mr. Speaker, will come via a supplementary appropriation. But it's not a case that we are overspending, that they are fresh funds. So what the member for Barbuda and also the member for Austin East and St. Luke would have indicated to the public is that, you know, we are overspending and we're abusing public resources and that we're not prioritizing our spending, which is not the case. I recall back in 2015, 2016, we came into a windfall. It was the Lazarenko money, over $60 million US. Those funds were brought into the Treasury accounts as a credit, as revenue. And then when we spent those funds, Mr. Speaker, they were taken out via supplementary appropriations. And this is something that happens routinely. Similarly, during the period of COVID, when we had to prioritize healthcare spending, the millions, or maybe tens of millions that we would have spent on PPEs, clearly we could not have budgeted for it. No one knew that COVID would have become a pandemic and would have decimated economies globally. So all of those funding to build out the IDC, the new hospital at Nugent Avenue, all of the PPEs, they came through supplementary appropriations. I'll give you another case in point, Mr. Speaker. When we purchased West Indies Oil Company, we didn't have the funds to buy it. We could not have budgeted for it. But sometime in 2015, we got a loan of $30 million US from Global Bank of Commerce. So, came in as revenue in the Treasury. And then we had to expend the funds as capital investment to purchase West Indies Oil Company. It's a fluid situation. I'll give you yet another example, Mr. Speaker. Back in 2019, when we were negotiating with UWI to get a campus here, they said to us, look, the history of Antigua and Barbuda going back decades was such that the country was always in arrears. You owe us $19 million. If you want to have a further discussion about having a campus, you have to pay it off. What were we to say to them? That we had to wait until following year's budget in order to deal with that matter? You know what we did, Mr. Speaker? We got one of the CIP operators to advance $13.5 million to us, and we took the balance, I believe, from NAMCO. And we had to create again supplementary appropriations in order to pay the $19 million in order to remove that impediment so that we could have established a university campus. Then, Mr. Speaker, we also had to create a budget line item for the operating expenses, which would have been several million dollars. But the assertion was made to Mr. Speaker that we have not covered salaries and wages. If you look among the supplementary appropriation documents, you'll see in 1 year that would have spent $11.5 million in extra spending on salaries and wages and pensions. Now, Mr. Speaker, we have had to spend in the region of $200 million in order to stabilize Social Security, to literally prevent it from collapse, because Social Security was deemed to be insolvent as far back as 2010 under the UPP. Now, in 2020 and 2021, Mr. Speaker, we had to pay in excess of the budgeted amounts in order to keep Social Security solvent. Again, those payments came via supplementary appropriations. What we were to do, say to the pensioners that we can't pay them because it is irresponsible for us to pass a supplementary appropriation. We had to wait until the next budget cycle to pay them. So you have to take into consideration that the exigencies of the service would require supplemental appropriations from time to time. What the members on the other side should be doing, Mr. Speaker, is to look at the various line items and to see whether or not the spendings were appropriate and whether or not there's any overspending. And I recall, for example, Mr. Speaker, when we examined their supplementary appropriations, which incidentally we had to bring to this Parliament because they did not bring any during the 10-year 10 years in office, we noticed that the capital spending in public works, they were extremely excessive. They spent, Mr. Speaker, over $1.4 billion. And when we looked at the quality and the quantity of roads that were built, we recognized that there was a significant amount of wastage and theft of public resources. So that is a case that the members should be bringing to the table to identify where the fat is, if there's any, and to say to the public that the government would have spent, let's say, $10, $20 million in a particular project, but we only got maybe $5 million in value. If you're not making that type of intelligent argument, then it makes no sense. The closest that they've come, Mr. Speaker, to making that kind of argument is when a member for Barbuda said that we exceeded our travel budget by $1 million. But, Mr. Speaker, the travel budget under the UPP was between $7 to $10 million annually. I used to come to this parliament in opposition and track it every single year and to show how they were wasting our funds. We cut it to about $3 million, Mr. Speaker. So if we move from 3 to 4, the reality is it is half what they spent traveling when they were in government and delivered nothing for the people of Antigua and Barbuda. And I want to make the point here to Mr. Speaker, almost invariably when I travel, I keep it to a bare minimum. I travel alone to keep costs down. The former Prime Minister, when he traveled, he had a whole contingent. And it's not because I don't want to give people the opportunity to travel with me, but I want to keep the costs down. Not even a cameraman I take with me when I'm traveling, Mr. Speaker. So you will note that I would have made a number of speeches and so on, they're not captured, because I'm very cost conscious and I want to make sure that I'm not a burden on the state. In fact, the only time that the government paid for me to travel within the last year was when I went to the United Kingdom to sign off on the £4 million pounds grant. And I thought that was justifiable based on the fact that we were getting a grant of $4 million. When I traveled previously to the UAE, it was funded by the government of the UAE. They paid for everything, air travel, accommodation. So we are very frugal when it comes to the spending of public resources. So you cannot just look at the fact that they are supplementary appropriations and to suggest that the funds were misapplied. You have to go further. You have to go into the details, go behind the figures. If you do not understand, there's a Freedom of Information Act in which you can write to the Ministry of Finance and to get further details. I did it when I was in opposition, and it's a tool that is available to you. But not to come here to make frivolous statements and to, blow hot air and make a lot of noise and sound as though, what you're saying is true, it's truthful. So, Mr. Speaker, I hope that we can have, more significant and honest discourse coming from members on the other side. And, we're not going to continue to have, this type of dumbing down discourse in which members stay on the other side and, make false assertions about money's been misappropriated and that we're not prioritizing expenditure. I'll give another case in point, Mr. Speaker. In 2020, when our revenues were down by about 40%, we had a court order instructing the government to pay $8 million to HMB. We could not have budgeted for that. We had to find the money and pay it. How do you think we were able to pay? By again, another supplementary appropriation. So I've given so many examples, Mr. Speaker, as to how these funds could literally arise to hundreds of millions of dollars. In fact, in 1 year, they say it was as low as $33 million. Well, guess what? When you compare that to the billions of dollars in supplementary appropriations that we had to bring to the Parliament on behalf of a previous administration, a previous UPP administration, then you can see that we are far more responsible in accounting to the people of Antigua and Barbuda, far more responsible in literally, let's say, respecting the constitutional legal provisions. So, as a member for St. Mary's North indicated, we're easily one of the most accountable, one of the most respectable governments in terms of respecting the constitutional and legal requirements. And that is precisely what we're doing here, bringing these supplementary appropriations to this Honourable House. And we will have probably about 2 years outstanding. As soon as those are ready, we undertake to bring those to the Parliament. Mr. Speaker, I recommend the appropriation bills as presented to be considered by this Honourable House. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, I'll start again. It has been moved and seconded that bills shortly entitled, 5 bills, shortly entitled Supplementary Appropriation 2019 Bill 2022 be read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it, and the bills will now be read a second time.
An act to move the supplementary appropriation for the services of Antigua and Barbuda for the year 2015 and for other connected purposes.
Can we take all of them?
The bill now stands referred to a committee of the whole House to be considered clause by clause, and we seek the expertise of the Honorable Attorney General as to how we will deal with that.
Yes.
2015 to
We will,
2019.
yes, we will do them together, sir. 2015, 27.
And we go all the way
That's
down.
great.
Each one.
Yes, yes.
I thought that was so, but
Yes,
I yield to your
my friend.
expertise in this matter. All right, just let me get them in order, please. 2016, just 2016 to 2019. So, Madam Clerk, you...
And
But I know the problem you're having here. Because the actual bill itself,
this one. That's why I'm very confused.
219. Madam Clerk, see if you can put the bills in order. Okay? So let's have that quick exercise. This is 2018.
No, 2015 to
2019.
October 2015 to 2015.
Yeah.
2016, 2017,
Yeah.
2018, and 2019.
It's 2017.
With respect, Mr. Chair, the first act should be October 2015 to December
No, just put them in
2015.
order. I follow, but 15, 16,
17,
17,
18, and 19, sir.
18, and 19.
That is correct.
I'm in order now.
Yes.
Okay, so here we go, Madam Clerk. I'm ready. You ready?
Okay. An act to provide the supplementary appropriation for the services of Antigua and Barbuda for the year 2015 and for other connected purposes.
May I respectfully suggest acts to provide for supplementary appropriation from the term October 2015 right down to
2019.
2019.
Okay, all right.
Please.
Okay.
Thank you. Could you put it, please?
An act to provide for the supplementary appropriation for the services of Antigua and Barbuda for the years 2015 through 2019 and for other connected purposes.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, I'm trying to...
so
All right,
acts,
so we are now to questions in committee.
yes, Mr. Speaker.
Right. Now, we're going to deal with that from 2:15 to 2:90.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
2:90.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
And the wording will be the same.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
And we do one by one. So
You want one by one? Okay, one by one. Okay, go on.
let's get them in order. Yes.
One by
Start with
one.
2:15.
So,
Short title.
Right. Clause 1, short title and commencement.
The question is that short title do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye.
Clause 2.
Those against?
Sorry.
The ayes have it.
Clause 2, supplementary appropriation of the sum, should we can do it individually?
32
The whole
million.
thing? Okay. Of 32,232,575. 572.
The question is that clause 2, supplementary appropriation of the sum of $32,235,572 do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
The schedule.
Sorry?
The schedule.
Yeah. The question is that the schedule do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
The title.
The question is that the title do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 1, short title.
Clause 1, short title. The question is that clause 1, the short title, do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 2, supplementary appropriation of the sum of $187,411,872.
The question is that clause 2, supplementary appropriation of the sum of $187,411,872 do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
The schedule.
The question is that the schedule do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
The title.
The question is that the title do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 1, short title.
Question is that clause 1, the short title, do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 2, supplementary appropriation of the sum of $220,444,689.
The question is that clause 2, supplementary appropriation of the sum of $220,444,689 do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
The schedule.
The question is that the schedule do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
The title.
The question is that the title do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 1, short title.
Question is that clause 1, short title, do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 2, supplementary appropriation of the sum of $198,100,000 $62,222.
Question is at clause 2, supplementary appropriation of the sum of $223 million.
No, 198.
219? Oh, sorry. Well,
Yeah.
beg your pardon. I was in the wrong
bill.
place. Yes. All right. Start again, Madam Clerk. Short title.
Short title.
Question is that the short title to stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 2, supplementary appropriation of the sum of $198,162,222.
The question is that clause 2, supplementary appropriation of the sum of $198,162,222 do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
The schedule.
The question is that the schedule do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
The title.
The question is that the title do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 1, short title.
The question is that clause 1, the short title do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 2, supplementary appropriation of the sum of $223,533,913.
Question is that clause 2, supplementary appropriation of the sum of $223,533,913 do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
The schedule.
The question is that the schedule do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
The title.
The question is that the title do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
That's it.
No. The House now resumes its sitting.
Speaker, thank you very much. Before I move to the reporting stage, just want to state here that I forgot to mention one of the most important aspects with these supplementary appropriation bills. Our $50 million that we paid in back pay were also covered by supplementary appropriations. Anyway, Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to report that the bills shortly entitled the Supplementary Appropriation Bills from 2016 to 2019, 2015 to 2019, Mr. Speaker, sorry, have passed through the committee stage without amendment, and I therefore move the adoption of the report of the committee on the bill, or bills.
Sorry? It has been moved and seconded that the report of the committee on the bills supplementary appropriation 2000 bill 2002 from the year 2015 to the year 2019 be adopted. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Speaker, I beg to move that the supplementary appropriation bills in 2019 be read the third time passed.
Second motion, Mr. Speaker.
It has been moved and seconded that the bills shortly entitled Supplementary Appropriation Bill, October 2015 to December 2015 Bill, 2022 to the year Supplementary Appropriation 2019 Bill 2022 be read a third time. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The bill will now be read a third time.
Acts to provide supplementary appropriation for the services of Antigua and Barbuda for the years 2015 through 2019 and for other connected purposes.
The bills have been read a third time and passed accordingly. I recognize the Attorney General. Let's catch our breath here, sir.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very kindly.
Take your time, sir. Take your time. Take your time, sir. And get everything together. Now, Mr. Speaker, we're now at item...
Now I recognize the Attorney General.
We're down at item 16E, Mr. Speaker. 16E.
Yeah?
16E.
Sorry.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. 16D, sorry, D, sorry. Yeah, 16D, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move the suspension of Standing Orders 59A and 63 to enable the House to proceed with the second and third readings of the following bill for an act shortly entitled the Architects' Professions Amendment Bill 2022. Rob?
Beg to second that, sir.
It's been moved and seconded that Standing Orders 59A and 63 to enable the House to proceed with the second and third readings of the bill shortly entitled the Architects' Professions Amendment Bill 2022.
Those in favor?
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, it gives me a great pleasure, Mr. Speaker, to bring this particular bill for debate today. You with me, sir?
No, you go ahead, sir. You go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, we have looked at the Architects Association here in Antigua and Barbuda and recognize that what we're doing here, Mr. Speaker, is in the interest of the profession of architects. We intend, Mr. Speaker, very shortly, I dare say, to also introduce into Parliament legislation governing the context of accountants. We've done that already with the engineers. The representation made, Mr. Speaker, to do that also for bailiffs and any other professions in the state of Antigua and Barbuda. We are now in the 21st century. It's essential, Mr. Speaker, that all of these professions are regulated and regulated properly. Same can be said for the Medical Association. They have got their rules and regulations. The Bar Association for the lawyers. So we're moving on now. For architects, we're looking also, Mr. Speaker, at truckers and other type of professionals in the state of Antigua and Barbuda. Now, Mr. Speaker, we're looking today at the bill called the Architects' Professions Amendment Bill 2022. What really is this bill all about? You turn to page 6, Mr. Speaker, of the bill as circulated. This amendment, Mr. Speaker, to the Architects' Professions Act number 21 of 2018 is to ensure the automatic registration of persons who were previously registered as architects under the Architects Registration Act, Cap 34. Let us pause there for a cause. Mr. Speaker, many architects before the passage of this new act back in 2018, Mr. Speaker, practiced their profession under the old act. It is felt only just and proper that some architects ought to be grandfathered in. Persons practicing profession over 20 years, 25 years, 30 years. I can quite recall, Mr. Speaker, that there was one architect, Mr. Scott Glendenning, who had been practicing here He did the building right down there on High Street, right opposite Seco Pharmacy. He did the building, Mr. Speaker, up there for Stanford Buildings, but he wasn't able to be registered. Why? Because the new acts set out certain stipulations which he could not at that time fulfill. But his works are there to be seen. There was another Antiguan gentleman, a very famous Antiguan gentleman, who did some fantastic buildings in this country. I mentioned one in High Street. That wasn't Scott. That was another local Antiguan gentleman. But it's Mr. Payne, right in High Street. And it is thought that those type of persons who have been practicing for so many years ought probably to be grandfathered in. And that's what we're doing here, Mr. Speaker. They have been left out. It's wrong. They practiced for over 30 odd years, some of them, and they ought to be given the opportunity to practice their profession as they've done over all those years, Mr. Speaker. That's the first thing this bill is intended to do. What, therefore, is the second thing that the bill intends to do? It says this, Mr. Speaker, and to better regulate the practice of architecture. As we read the bill further, Section 17, same explanatory memorandum, required architects that are registered under the old act to submit an application to be registered. This requirement is being removed. Hence, architects registered under the old act can now be fully grandfathered into the system. We said that. The second point is, Mr. Speaker, Section 31 dealt with permitting the practice of architecture by persons who are not architects. Under the legislation passed in 2018, these individuals were permitted to provide drawings for buildings, both residential and commercial, of up to 2 stories and 25,000 square feet. This amendment continues to permit non-architects to provide architectural work, but the premises, residential or commercial, should be no more than a single story, nor exceeding 2,500 square feet. Why is this the case? Mr. Speaker, in the Commonwealth countries, we've done extensive research, and we've got to be consistent with our colleagues around the world. My friend from St. John's Rules should tell you that there are complaints being made of houses being built, and because they're not properly done, cracks appear, problems happening. That is to say, Mr. Speaker, not that I'm faulting the technicians, but that they do not have the necessary training, we believe, experience, or qualifications to determine how to construct, how to design buildings, taking in mind earthquake movements, hurricanes, and things of this nature. In addition to that, Mr. Speaker, every architect registered is required to have insurance, so that if in fact buildings suffer damage, you can always go to the insurance company and claim against the architects for work done not in a professional manner. These type of situations do not exist with technicians. We had meetings in this room, and they were advised about 2 years ago, let us form you into a situation where you can be regulated, where each of your members can meet certain specifications, where you can get your qualifications, where you can get the insurance coverage. So when you build buildings and anything go wrong, persons can be able to be satisfied that they can claim for compensation when and if those matters arise. That has not happened. So we look at other countries around the region, and as I said, in the Commonwealth in particular, and we're getting a systematic, synergized combination, harmonized regulations to cover the situation. And Mr. Speaker, that really is the basis of the second amendment. That is to say, to make certain that persons who are not qualified architects, of course they can do their designs They can do buildings up to 2,500 square feet. But once they're going above that situation, Mr. Speaker, they must do one of two things. If they have been retained to do those drawings, they must do so on the instructions of registered architects. They must, therefore, be held accountable if, in fact, a building is built and something goes wrong. You must have somebody to go against. We have many situations today where persons have problems and now their buildings are being redone because they were designed not by architects but by technicians who didn't take this technical aspect of the work in place. This government, Mr. Speaker, is such. I, as Attorney General, am swarmed, Mr. Speaker, with complaints. Swarmed with complaints from all and sundry. And we met in chambers. We looked at the complaints. We looked at the law. We examined the situation across the country. We examined the laws around the Commonwealth. And this is what we've determined is the right thing to do. So, Mr. Speaker, these are very simple, very, very simple amendments to the bill, Mr. Speaker. The first, as I indicated, Mr. Pringle and my friend Mr. Barbuda, is to grandfather in those old architects. And the second one is to provide protection for consumers, for a person who uses services of technicians, to make certain that, yes, you can work. Yes, you can do designs. Nobody's stopping you from doing design. But you can design up to a particular square footage. And that's exactly what we're doing today, Mr. Speaker. Very, very simple amendments, Mr. Speaker. And I'm asking that this bill, as it stands, be referred for discussion among my colleagues, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, those really are the very simple amendments being proposed today to the Architects Professional Amendments Act, Bill 2022.
Speaker begs for the bill and reserve the right to speak.
Leader of the Opposition.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I support up to Section 17 in the explanatory memorandum of the Architects Professional Act 2018, what the requirement in terms of grandfathering those persons whom would have been operating for quite some time. But, Mr. Speaker, the amendment to Section 31, which pertaining to the practice of architect by persons who are non-architects under the legislation passed in 2018, Mr. Speaker, I cannot support that clause, Mr. Speaker, simply because, Mr. Speaker, what I'm seeing here in this present bill, Mr. Speaker, is that we're alienating a group of persons based on their qualifications and not their competencies. Because, Mr. Speaker, I don't agree with the AG in terms of they're not, when he mentioned as to the qualified person of who to go after. Because there's also another aspect of it that is needed for a construction of a building, which is an engineer who plays a very critical role in ensuring that the procedures that the contractor should follow is adhered to. So, Mr. Speaker, what this is doing, because a draftsman can draw 5-story, but once you give it to an architect for approval, it's okay, which was drawn by a draftsman. But, Mr. Speaker, what is happening here now? You're seeing Antigua and Barbuda, everybody try to add extra space, so sometimes they can do a little rental. And if you're going to limit a draftsman to 1 story, he may not get any work to do. And I know the exact same thing that the AG is trying to curtail. All you simply need is for an engineer, or putting it that the draftsman must have a structural engineer signed off on that drawing. Because it's the engineer is who going to tell you what size of steel and make sure that the foundation you have selected for that building is suitable for the building you're building. I don't think it's based on the draftsman's ability to draw these drawings. But what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, is that after the draftsman would have put certain things in place, and with sometimes the owner trying to cut costs, reduces the size of steel and so in buildings, but the drawing may speak to one, and it calls for now DCA to have a greater inspection process. Because what is happening, Mr. Speaker, you only have a structural engineer come to a site for the request of the bank, when to advise the bank that they have reached certain stages. So how we cannot, the person cannot say, the engineer can only say that they reached to this stage. They don't know what type of material they use on the floor. So I think it has to be a collaboration. And if we're going to look at it from that perspective, AG, we're going to alienate persons, Mr. AG. And I don't think we're living in a world for that. I agree that, okay, based on your expertise, that you may have a certain limit. But if you're going to limit draftsmen to two-story, I don't think they're going to be able to work in Antigua and Barbuda. Because you hardly find anybody building a single-story house in Antigua and Barbuda. So I ask that we really look at that, Mr. Speaker, and let us continue to include everybody and ensure that we're creating an environment for everybody to eat. And I am not taking anything from the architects. They would have gone out and put in their studies. But we have to understand, until we reach to that point where you either have to have a draftsman association. We need to look at something else, Mr. AG. I can't support that with that clause that are going to alienate people from making a living. So I'm open, Mr. Speaker, to when we reach committee stage, we can relook at that.
Would you go, that was between you and I, you would give a Bush lawyer a case?
Two totally different situations, Mr.
No,
Speaker.
not,
Two totally different situations.
All right, hold on. Would you give a solicitor's clerk or attorney's clerk who is very good a case to do where he or she would just do it without the lawyer at all having an input?
But Mr. Speaker, the other side to that, why it's so different. If I as a draftsman, have an engineer working alongside me, it giving me the same expertise and even more as it relates to the structural damages that the AG spoke of in terms of cracking and all of that.
That's a valid point, provided the engineer will do so, and I can tell you they don't.
Yes, but the engineer must be engaged.
Because they become liable if an error is made.
But again, and it should not stop there at the draftsman level. It should be something that each person that is building a house should embark on, ensuring that there's an engineer there from the onset. Because what it does, it eliminates and it cuts costs. Because when you look at the 3% or so, I think that the engineer cost, the cost of the engineer, what you will find happening is that when it reaches certain stages, the engineer is already on the job, and the client, which is the owner, would be comfortable knowing that the necessary steps and procedures are followed, rather than after the fact, the engineer go and assess the property.
I didn't mean to take up so much of your time, but I just an interjection. I recognize the member for St. Phillips North.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this. Anywhere I see poor people is having an opportunity, we must not just look at it so, is to come up with ideas that will help those people. Today in Antigua and Barbuda, you nor I can build a fowl coop unless we send it to DCA. And they're going to come to check it out and to see what is right and what is wrong. So we can't do no buildings in Antigua now. And Mr. Speaker, if you go around Antigua, at least 70 to 80% of the buildings that were built long ago, they do not pass 1 story. They do not pass 1 story. And these are the ones that will be able to do that, just a 1 story. And they have to go now to DCA. That is what this government has done, to have that type of qualified people there. How can these young people who have been taught in the various schools to become draftsmen or what have you, etc., and now that we're telling them they cannot do no work at all? It can't be fair, man. How are you going to help them up? From there, they might be able to make some money that will send them further on to university. Take all these things into consideration. But it's typical of the UPP. You talk a nice talk, but you don't give a damn. Yeah, sleeping? I was listening to you, chatting your rubbish. Anyway, sorry, I take that back.
No, and in fact, it wasn't rubbish. He made good points.
He made some good points, but I thought a man like him would be supporting our young people. No, you were not sounding that way. You are not sounding that way. When they go to school, no, I'm listening to everything you're saying, and it's you cause me to get up and talk. You cause me to get up and talk. Because I have young boys and girls in my constituency. They're doing draft. But that's what you were saying. That's what you're saying. But here the Act says 1 story they go to. No, the Act here says 1 story.
I think if I may, Mr. Speaker, on a point of order.
Go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, all I said earlier, and I think the member is totally offside where that is concerned, because all I've said, Mr. Speaker, that is alienating persons. I never said what he's proposing there, Mr. Speaker. And I ask that the member clear up that.
I think he's right. What I think the member said was that he would allow them to go to 2 stories.
No.
Right? You wouldn't restrict them to a single story or whatever. Right. And therein lies the rub.
There are 2 sections in it. One who had been practicing all the time, has the years going, he can go up to 2 story. But the young school ones and them that just left school and want to be trained some more, they can only go up to 1 story. It's in here.
Which one is that?
Read number 3. The provision of architectural services for premises intended for commercial use, where the commercial building is a single-story building and the total size does not exceed 2,500 square feet. The provision of architectural service for residential dwelling that is a single story and does not exceed 2,500 square feet, and where multiple production of the residential building is not involved. It clears it up there, but we have to help them people. And that is the face that you all have covered, to give people in Antigua and Barbuda the impression, we care for you. Yeah, when it suits you. But you must come clean and come straight all the time. I tell you what, Mr. Speaker, and with your permission, sir, you look some years ago, we were not in office. That was in 2005 or 2006, they're about there. they had encouraged the Hadids to get in to the power business. They gave them their word for them to build a 50.9 megawatts plant. That's the speaker up there, not over there. And when you look at that, sir, they refused because one of the Hadids who was in their government fell out.
Yeah, but
They decided,
I'm not sure that's relevant. I don't think we should go down that road.
you don't think you should go down that road, sir?
Well, all right. Well,
They're injured party, and that's the attitude of them. I'm juxtaposing it to their attitude. Okay, I'm just juxtaposing to that. And Mr. Speaker, those people who had supported them joined them in their cabinet, and they went after them. And they took it to the court. They took it to the court. And it went all the way up to Privy Council. And they won. And architecture?
yeah, we did. Yeah,
That's like 200.
I think
And Mr. Speaker,
Honorable member, I really can't see the direct relevance.
okay, I'm going to tell you now. I'm coming to it now.
All right.
I'm coming to it now. And when you look, sir, APUA had to pay what the Privy Council said. It was $222 million, eh? $222 million.
That was the same case that the honorable member for Barbuda's lawyer didn't lose. All right, ask the AG, talk to the AG.
Oh, okay, okay. So after that, sir, they won that case. And here it is. Our leader, our good, soft heart leader. Yes, unless he's fighting for his country, then he change up. And he right. And he right. And when you look at that, sir, where we had to pay that APUA, when we took over, APA didn't have here to buy
Mr.
sugar
Speaker,
cane.
that has no relevancy on the bill.
Make the objection. Make the objection. Mr. Leader, if you're objecting on a point of order, make it.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, because on
The
the
point of order is relevance.
that has no relevance to
You're
the bill.
correct. You're correct. Make the point. Please, that is not relevant to the case. Let's go. He's right.
And Mr. Speaker, whether or not this went on in beautiful Antigua and Barbuda, and we had to pay all them bills, and we didn't cause it. Mr. Speaker, I support young people becoming architects, and they can practice, and I think show some love to them. Show some love. Labor rights? Labor rights are calling for my head. Where? For what? Well, it's all right. It's all right. And let me tell you something.
St. Philip's.
Let me
St.
tell you
Philip's
something.
North.
Wet your hand and wait for me soon. You will hear what coming out, okay? You just wet your hand and wait for me, okay? And let me tell you, this government, I see you don't want me to talk, but this government cares about Antiguans and Barbudans, eh? And we don't do it at the back of our houses. We don't do it somewhere else. We speak out, and all of you can come to us. You see the relationship that we have? Because we don't bar nobody. We help. We look after people's interests. We have these people right there. When you go around, and I'm sure that if you start to canvass now, you will find with the people in them, when you go, they say, I'm a bird man or a bird woman. They're waiting that. You see, they don't want that. Mr. Speaker, they're running me. I will give them a break, but I'll come back. And I'll do what I have to do and say what I have to say. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this bill or this amendment before us, or the bill. Mr. Speaker, I think we're all on the same page as it stands with Section 17, the amendment proposed. And I fully support that, to have the more experienced architects being grandfathered into the system and being registered so that they can practice as per usual. But under Section 31, it is by no means are we trying to cut out the draftsmen or limit them. In an essence, what we're trying to do here, Mr. Speaker, as I can see, we're categorizing them and safeguarding the investment of individuals. Now, Mr. Speaker, when one chooses to embark on constructing their home, they start off with the drawings, they go to, yes, either a draftsman or an architect. But that investment in itself may very well be one single most expensive investment in their entire lives. It is of note that the registered architects must be insured. Draftsmen, on the other hand, architectural technicians, on the other hand, do not have to be insured. So if there is a case where one contracts a draftsman or an architectural technician to do a drawing for them, and there's some fault in the drawing, there's nowhere for them to fall on or to get redress. So, in an essence, this amendment helps to safeguard the investments of the people. And that is very, very important. And as Minister responsible for the DCA, I can say that we've seen a few situations where this has happened. And so we welcome this amendment 100% and to the T. Now, Mr. Speaker, it also speaks in this second amendment under Section 31 that draftsmen are not prohibited to drawing for individuals commercial properties, but it does limit the size. So if the commercial property is more than 2,500 square feet, then they would not be able to submit. But that doesn't mean they cannot draw for somebody who has a smaller storefront space. So by no means, again, are we cutting them out. Safe to say, if, for example, Mr. Speaker, one has to go into a surgery, and there's preliminary surgery details and reports to be done, I don't think you'd want a nursing assistant to do the report for you. If you're going into major heart surgery, you're going to want the surgeon to map it out himself to ensure that there are no mistakes going forward. Yes, we spoke about having the addition of an engineer being on site and that sort of thing, but that's after it would have gone through the preliminary stages of looking at it by the DCA and that sort of thing. But it's not really for the DCA to go back and forth with the draftsman or the architect to say, come and fix this, come and fix that. You should know what you're doing. And so, no, I'm saying that to say, I'm not saying that they're not aware of what they're doing, but their expertise only goes up to a certain level. I mean, they're individuals, as Sir Robin, member for St. Philip's North, would have pointed out, there are many individuals who would have studied and have gone to the extents of architectural school, architectural study. There's some engineering in that as well that a draftsman or architectural technician may not have been exposed to. So these are the sort of things that we want to make sure that we cross our T's and dot our I's when individuals are making these large investments, and overall for the betterment of development throughout Antigua and Barbuda. So, Mr. Speaker, that is my short input, and I fully approve this bill, and I welcome it as the member represent or minister responsible for the Development Control Authority. Thank you.
Thank you. Recognize the member for Rural South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this bill, but I support it with a bit of an asterisk next to it. I agree with the principle that there must be some threshold that is met for which someone can qualify or to be able to be registered as an architect or recognized as an architect and produce a certain body of work. But, Mr. Speaker, we have, just like in the education system, different ways to matriculate to a particular profession. So much like, for example, if you want to attend university, you can get a certain amount of subjects and you matriculate into a program, or you can have a certain amount of experience and get into that program. I believe that it's important that we continue to keep the channels open, where persons who may not have the same opportunity to, for example, go off to university to engage in formal studies in architecture, would have a path by which they can advance themselves while at the same time earning a living. Now, I believe one of the areas that we've discussed here is persons being grandfathered in with a certain amount of experience, which I fully support. I would just like, though, and perhaps we can do it in committee stage, to have some discussion about what exactly is the amount of time that someone would have to be practicing in the profession to be grandfathered in. I'm not sure that it was discussed before. I stepped out for a few minutes, perhaps it was. But it's something I would like discussed at committee stage. As it relates to whether or not a draftsman can engage in a particular type of work or produce a certain body of work and drawings for structures above a single story. I'm a bit torn on that, Mr. Speaker, and I'll tell you why. I've worked quite extensively with draftsmen and architects here in Antigua and Barbuda. In fact, most of the work that I've done over my life, where construction is concerned, has been done through the services of a particular draftsman. I've never had, and I'm talking about multi-story projects now, I've never had an issue with it. And that could be an anomaly because he may be more experienced than some others. But what I believe is important, though, is that irrespective of whether or not a person is a certified architect or a qualified, let me use that word, architect, or a draftsman who has a certain amount of experience, I think it's always important to have engineers as a part of the project. Now, we may say that it will carry up the cost of construction and the cost of doing this sort of work, but at the end of the day, you get what you pay for. And it's always important to ensure that irrespective of the stage in which the work is at, the portion of development that is taking place, whether you're in the foundation or the superstructure, that you have the adequate expertise. And I can tell you, not all architects have the ability to do some of that engineering work. And so notwithstanding, and Mr. Speaker, I'll give you an example. As you're aware, I'm a trained land surveyor, but I can't draw a survey plan to save my life. I simply do not have, I've been taught how to do it in university and I've been successful in my career, but I always had to engage someone to do my drawings, notwithstanding I understand the technical requirement of getting it done. And so I don't want us to take it for granted that because someone is a trained and qualified architect, that they automatically have the ability to do even some of those supplementary activities that come along with construction. And so if I can summarize my feeling on this bill, Mr. Speaker, I support it. I support a threshold. I'm not sure that I fully agree that a draftsman only ought to be limited to single-story structures. I think that is something that we may have to look at. But I fully support the notion that draftsmen must be given an opportunity to work. However, every person involved in that construction sector and that design part of the work we must not take it for granted that they are familiar with every aspect of the work. And other professions, engineers, persons who do the testing of soil, for example, the percolation test, all of these professions are required. And let's not just take it for granted that someone being a qualified architect automatically has the ability to provide a full suite. of services. I wouldn't go above 2 stories, maximum 2 stories. I would definitely not go above 2 stories. So, Mr. Speaker, that is my very short contribution. I'm sorry?
To 3 stories?
No, the question was asked if I were to recommend how many stories a draftsman with certain supporting personnel around him could provide drafting services for, and I believe 2 stories would be a reasonable maximum. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
2 stories, but what's
Afterwards. Mr. Speaker, I want to get certain things clear.
I appreciate this bill, you know. But you didn't think about them contractors when you were doing this?
Yes, as a matter of fact, they too.
You didn't think of them?
We're going to bring them in as well, PM.
All my career and yours, you come upon these contractors ripping off of the elderly people, elderly
PM.
Diaspora people and so on. Get to them before this year.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think the member for us is understand what we have to deal with, you know.
But I will work with him.
He don't understand what we're dealing with, see?
It's
He's
crazy.
talking about politics.
The problem out there, in my humble view, is not so much the draft bill. It's a proper act for country. But the problem we have in this country are contractors that are not only not qualified, cookish and everything else, and there's people are suffering. I'm telling you straight, I say it, I know because I've had to do cases involved with it.
Mr. Speaker, we shall later be dealing with all those different aspects. my young drafter, Mr. Ryan, and of course Ms. Jarvis and the others, will come back with all those different acts. But Mr. Speaker, I want to make this point clear. One, we talk about grandfathering in. I want to make it clear. The amendment to the Act is to ensure the automatic registration of persons who were previously registered as architects. So they were architects before, not experience alone, and they grandfathered in. They must have been registered before as architects. You see, because what the Act said, Mr. Speaker, was that even though you were registered before, you have to reapply to be registered to work. That's correct. So we wanted to cut that part of it out. Secondly, I want to start with my friend from St. Philip's North made a very good point. And the Minister of Housing made a very good point. Mr. Speaker, we did a survey. You think we just come to Parliament and bring action on what we're talking about? About 90% of the people, 90% of the houses in Antigua are single-story houses. 90%. 90%, and I want you to go and do a survey. 90% of buildings in this country are single-story buildings. 90%. Of course. So when you talk about cutting out people, nobody's been cut out nowhere. We did it because the complaints being made to the office are persons who have buildings more than 1 story. The persons complaining are those who have buildings that are more than 1 story. And then we did our checks around the region. We understood why. As our friends from Trinidad told us, the difficulty is not with the single-story buildings. They are with the buildings above 1 story because, one, the weight, and another thing too. Architects are not engineers. And even when architects do the drawing, the engineers will have to go and inspect what's going on all the way through. But architects must, as a matter of law, have insurance coverage. Draft persons do not have that. Look, we brought them in here, you know, Mr. Pringle. We brought them in here, you know. Weren't you at the meeting? You at the meeting? Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, we had a meeting. I just remember, we had a meeting in here. And he was present, the member was present. He heard the arguments himself. Pringle was here. No, the member was there. Yes. And Mr. Speaker, my friend, the member would have said, I would have heard it said and agreed that we would have formed an association for the drafts persons get a bill for them, organize them into a unit so they can get insurance to cover themselves. They too, like architects, would have to get engineers to monitor what they're doing. My friend from RCDs was there, and he heard that as well. Notice, Mr. Speaker, what I just said. The arguments and complaints that we have about buildings are above 1 story. Wait, no? Well, that is what he's saying too, and that's why we're going to deal with them as well. We're going to deal with them as well. And the thing is, the main focus, my friend, from Rural South, is that draftspersons are not mandated in law, to have insurance coverage. So when a man expends money, $250,000, $300,000 to build a single-story building, and something happens to the building, who are you going to sue? Who are you going to sue? Where is the coverage? Where is the coverage to cover persons who invest their hard-earned money in a single-story building? Something happens, you want some kind of bad drawing taking place. What happens? Oh. Your views, my views, your views. Mr. Speaker, and I want to commend my friend from St. John's Rural East. For the very first time, Mr. Speaker, since the 1970s, we're now trying to put in place procedures to proper monitor the construction of building from the drawings right up. Very soon we're going to have before this house as well amendments to the Fire Services Act, where no building is going to be passed to be built except they have proper fire escapes, extinguishers and so on. All that is being done under the guidance of the member from St. John's Rural East. This young, dynamic minister is determined to have a structured development of housing stock in this country. And I, as AG, must help her to get this thing under proper control. We have had too many complaints, Mr. Speaker, of persons who cannot get compensation for buildings done by persons who claim to be tech. And as a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, it's against the law for draftspersons to say they the architects, It's against the law, This, my friend from Austin, he said, look, he used to teach building technology. Is that correct? Yes. Yes, so you don't know better than that. You should know. You should know. You should know. You were a teacher once. You were a teacher once teaching this same subject. You were a teacher. No.
Not even supposed to be talking, not on the floor.
Yeah, we're both from old road. Don't worry, we're older people. No.
This is not a response time.
Yeah. Yes, so Mr. Speaker, not only is this bill intended to regulate and to protect persons who have their whole life savings and want to build a house, a single-story house. They go to a technician because the technician really is not as expensive as an architect. But we are not trying to keep technicians from making a living. They can, as I indicated. Do any research, and I'll go further to say, not even 90, between 80% and more of the houses, 80% of the houses are single-story buildings. You understand, sir? So we are only trying to protect, and notice. Huh? Yeah, yes, but I'm going further back. And Mr. Speaker, if you notice the complaints that are being made, they aren't made for the single-story houses, They're being made for the two-story buildings. However, we're prepared, not targeting, trying to protect. But, Mr. Speaker, we will look at it on the committee stage, we'll look at it and see if we can make an amendment which is acceptable to the Parliament as a whole. But we, speaking about my ministry and the ministry of DCA, are concerned because the complaints are coming to us from people who have got bad work done or not so good work done, and can't get compensation because of the structural build, not engineering now, the way it was designed. Here again. And that is why the minister is going to make sure that there's proper, you're right, proper supervision of drawings before they are approved. All that is in store. The minister will make sure of all of that. That's not true. Not structured here. So we don't committee say. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask that this bill now be submitted to the House to be considered clause by clause, Mr. Speaker.
Anyway, where are we at? It has been moved and seconded that a bill shortly entitled the Architects Profession Amendment Bill 2022 be read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The bill will now be read a second time.
An act to amend the Architects Professions Act 2018, 91 of 2018.
The bill now stands referred to a committee of the whole House to be considered clause by clause.
Clause 1, short title.
The question is that clause 1, short title, do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 2, interpretation.
The question is that clause 2, interpretation, do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 3, amendment of section 17, continuation of existing registration.
The question is that clause 3, amendment of section 17, continuation of existing registration, do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 4, amendment of section 31, practice of architecture by persons other than registered architects.
Mr. Chair.
And the discussion starts.
Yes, Mr. Chair. May I hear your representation, my friend from All Saints East and St. Luke's?
Based on what it is that I understand you're trying to do, it's not from a design perspective. It's a situation in which we need to now have engineers be a part of the process after the drawing would have completed. So a draftman would have to present his drawing to an engineer to ensure the building is properly, the structure is stable enough to carry the size of building and all of that. I think that is the situation that you're talking about in terms of second story going up and whatever. Because I can draw a plan utilizing all the requirements by law here in Antigua and Barbuda. And I would have given it to the client. DCA would have approved it. Differently than DCA do periodic checks on site. Who is on site to verify that the contractor is doing the necessary things he ought to do? And that is where we're having a problem, not based on how the building can be well designed, up to 7 story. But again, how do we ensure, because the only time you have an engineer on site is to do the checks for the banks. So I think it's something that, we need to start to put out there more, that when you are embarking on building your home, is for you to get an engineer involved from the design process. it also cut down the expense. Because when an engineer goes to the site and said, yes, the floor slab has been cast, he don't know whether it's 3/8 steel under there or 1 inch steel. All he knows, he sees a cast slab. And that has nothing to do with the draftsman. So I think that we're putting some persons out of food if we're going to leave it the way it is, AG. Let us start to look at incorporating more persons in the building process. Because I think an engineer would cost what? 3% of the cost of the building?
Yeah.
And sometimes when you work out the 3%, it's less than what it is that you're paying an engineer to come. Because when the bank tells you to get an engineer, you're the one that's paying the cost. So why not you as the person who have to pay that for the rest of your lives? Get an engineer from the onset. And I think that is where the reduction in what you're talking about, you'll see a difference. Because now the engineer would be the one responsible to the client, to the builder, to the homeowner. So if it is that something goes wrong in terms of cracking and all of that, is the engineer would be liable. Because he would have approved the drawing and make sure, because you only find a building, 2 things make a building crack. 1, substandard materials, or poor design of the foundation. And once... and not using the required materials that is so necessary for the building to be structurally stable.
Okay.
So I don't think it's a draftsman issue, AG. I think we can look at it. And even if we're saying that you want to put some responsibility on draftsmen, put a clause in it that draftsmen should also get insurance up to a certain amount.
I'm sorry. Thank you, AG. You know, I share similar sentiments, but just one thing. I believe some of the issues you had mentioned, AG, I think they're construction issues, and as the member for Austin East and St. Luke said, they're not design issues. Because what happens is, as I'm sure you're familiar with the process, a drawing is prepared, submitted to DCA. DCA now has the responsibility to ensure that all elements of that drawing meets the building code and is able to be approved to go forward into the construction phase. So whether the drawing is done by an architect or a draftsman, there are certain requirements it must meet. So the building inspectors at DCA will go to make sure the slabs are of a particular size, the schedule of material that is presented is adequate for the structure that is being built, and so forth. And once that process is done and the drawing approved, this is where your contractor comes in, and the issues that you're mentioning about poor construction and cracked buildings, that's not a draftsman issue. That's a contractor or a builder issue. So I don't believe this amendment that we're looking at here addresses what you are speaking about. So I fully support the grandfathering in of the persons who have been there. I fully support the amendment that we're now discussing about allowing draftsmen to go to 2 stories and so on. I fully support that. And yes, sir, 2-story, exactly. And I also would support a discussion, and perhaps it may not be done at this sitting, but perhaps with some consultation with the relevant bodies about the issue of insurance, liability insurance, where there are design flaws. I would be open either whether residential or commercial, because you see, it still has to go through the DCA. The DCA still has to ensure that the structure and the design meets the building code. You understand? And so that's my contribution. And like I said, one second, Minister.
Quite a bit, yeah.
Well, the last thing I would suggest, again, perhaps not at this sitting, but perhaps some dialogue, some consultation could take place with persons within the industry about liability insurance for all of the practitioners. And we're now speaking about draftsman and architect, so that could be a discussion that takes place for a future amendment. Thank you.
Yeah, my issue is for the draftsman. Initially, we are saying he would be limited to a 1-story. That's right. Now, and the reason I'm raising this because I have some very experienced draftsmen. Now, if an experienced draftsman can get an architect to sign his work for a two-story, would that be acceptable? Yeah, because let me tell you, there are, you have to, yes, you have to get it, an endorsement of some kind. Yeah, but there some draftsmen have relationship with architects.
You see, we're missing the point here, people. The architects are designers, Architects are not engineers. Architects are designers.
Yes.
You cannot, you're still going to need engineers and the DCA. They have their role. And so there's no need to have an architect reviewing the work of a draftsman. It's a design. It's more art. This building design is more art than science. The science comes in when the engineers now have to do the work to ensure that the structure is safe.
There is some science at the level of the architect as well.
Well, very little, not a lot, but it's more art. They're into design.
No. Yeah. Some architectural work is not, it's major. It's major. Exactly. Yeah.
AG?
Yes, yes, Mr. Chairman.
AG, this debate takes me to two cases I've had. One is where a person, not a draft person, built a cantilever, put the steel in the wrong position that is underneath, and the cantilever come aground. Luckily, they hadn't put on any rails on it to be a patio. The other one was Country Pond, where I tried to beautify Country Pond and take political blows for it because Public Works built the nice little thing out there to fish and put the steel at the bottom of the cantilever, and it went into the pond, and guess who get the blame? Me, a lawyer. I get the blame. You remember? Do you remember that? I said that to say it's very important. There's certain parts of a building that if it's done improperly can cause tremendous cost of life. And the further up you go is the more danger and loss of life, which I think is the point that Parliament is discussing.
And to AG, you move towards them getting some aspect of insurance. Draftsman.
Mr. Chair, I list all of my colleagues, and I think we've come to the conclusion so that we would, instead of one story, Mr. Chairman, we just do two stories, and just double up the square footage from 2,005 to 5,000 to be consistent.
And that's a cardboard.
And that's a cardboard for everybody, okay? We just increased it across the board. I want to thank you, Mr. Pringle, for your contribution. That's what parliamentary thing is all about. And I'm very pleased about that. And thanks for the input of all parties concerned. Mr. Speaker. Yes, I am really giving him some...
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Leader of the Opposition, my friend, I'm sorry. Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Not for long.
Clause 4, amendment of section 31, practice of architecture by persons other than registered architects.
The question is amendment of section 31, practice of architecture by persons other than registered architects, as amended do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry. I didn't get what the final amendment was, because there was a lot of crosstalk.
Sorry?
5,000 square feet. So a single... What's the other one? Which one?
Leave out 31. Leave out 31.
On second thoughts, Mr. Speaker, having heard from the minister responsible, I think maybe you can expunge item 4 and just go along with what we've done so far. Is that acceptable to you, my friend? Leave it? You suggested that, ended. Yes. So what we'll do, sir, yes, please, and expunge 4. Just expunge 4. Yes, yes. Thank you very much for that input. Yes, that's fine, that's fine. So we expunge 4.
The question is that the enactment clause to stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
The title.
The question is that the title to stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The House now resumes its sitting.
Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the Honourable Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to report that the bill shortly entitled Architects Professions Amendment Bill 2022 has passed through the committee stage with one substantial amendment thereto. In the circumstances, Mr. Speaker, I move the adoption of the report of the committee on the bill. Mr. Rob?
It's been moved and seconded that the report of the committee on the bill, the Architects Professions Amendment Bill 2022 be adopted. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. It has been moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled the Architect Professions Amendment Bill 2022 be read a third time and passed. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it, and the bill will now be read a third time.
An act to amend the Architects Professions Act 2018, number 21 of 2018.
The bill has been read a third time and passed accordingly. By the way, what's the position with a split level?
That's another thing too. That's
Split level building.
Yeah.
Which is a hybrid.
We will come back. We'll come back.
Just sort of it.
We'll come back.
I have a
And then bear in mind what
a split level dwelling.
And yes, we'll come back on that, sir.
Just wondering.
We'll come back. Thank you, Mr.
I
Speaker.
recognize the Honourable Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the second and third readings of the following bill. No, not at all. I move the suspension of standing orders 59A and 63 to enable the House, Mr. Speaker, to proceed with the second and third reading of the following bill for an act short entitled the Magistrates Court of Procedure Amendment Bill 2022.
Second that, sir.
It's been moved and seconded that standing orders 59A and 63 be suspended to enable the House to proceed with the second and third readings of the bill, Magistrates Code of Procedure Amendment Bill 2022. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. The ayes have it. Recognize the Honourable Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, today again, Mr. Speaker, gives me great pleasure to debate the proposed amendments. As you're well aware, Mr. Speaker, Antigua and Barbuda has been chosen for the pilot project for the family court for the OECS region. Not only do we have the first family high court as a model, we're now going to be dealing with high court matters, with matters of family in the Magistrates Court. And because, Mr. Speaker, as you're well aware, that the Magistrates Court of Procedure Act is a statutory situation, we have to change the statute to allow the Chief Justice and 2 judges to make rules to govern proceedings in the family division. My colleague from St. Mary's South is not here, but I want to make it pellucid that we have already, I mean St. Philip's South, I'm sorry. St. Philip's South is not here. But I want to make it pellucid, sir, that the High Court is due to be opened shortly. And we have been asking for that court to be completed some time ago. Family court. And I'm hoping the entire Eastern Caribbean will be looking at us in July. And I'm hoping that that building will be ready for the opening of the model High Court in the sub-region. Mr. Speaker, the amendments today is to give the Chief Justice and 2 judges the right to make rules for dealing with the family court at the level of the Magistrates Court. As the law now stands, it is the Minister of Legal Affairs who makes regulations and procedural matters pertaining to the Magistrates Court. But that has to be changed to give to the Chief Justice and the 2 judges the right to make the changes in the Magistrates Court. So join with me, Mr. Speaker, as I read, Mr. Speaker, what is said in the memorandum. It says this: the purpose of this bill is to amend the Magistrates Court of Procedure Act to allow for the Chief Justice of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court and 2 other judges of the court to make rules to govern the conduct of proceedings in the family division of the Magistrates Court. Currently, the minister is responsible for making rules to govern the practice and procedure of the court in its operations today. That is the Minister of Legal Affairs. The bill, it says, contains 3 clauses. Clause 3, the power to make rules, contains substantive provisions of the amendment. Subsection 1, the general power to make the rules remains with the minister. Subsection 2 explains what some of the rules that may be made by the minister. Subsection 3 deals with the making of the rules by the Chief Justice and 2 other judges of the Supreme Court for the purpose of regulating the practice and procedure of the Magistrates Court's family division. Subsection 4 outlines the rules that may be made by the Chief Justice and the other 2 judges. Subsection 5 stipulates that the rules made under this section is subject to a negative resolution of Parliament. If you don't agree, we come back and strike it out. Subsection 6 identifies the acts of Parliament that come within the definition of the family court. Let me start very last. At page 5, what legislation comes under this jurisdiction? The Child Justice Act 2015, the Children Care and Adoption Act 2015, Domestic Violence Act 2015, the Maintenance of and Access to Children Act, and the Status of Children Act. So, Mr. Speaker, what will happen really is that the Magistrates Court now will deal with family matters pertaining to children who come before it. Domestic violence matters before the court. Protection orders before the court. Like marijuana, beating up we're talking about now, and so on. Getting family away from a particular husband or hostile person and vice versa. All of those matters will come now. All of that is here. I just mentioned it, my friend. I said the maintenance of and Access to Children Act. All right, thank you. And as the Minister of and member for St. Mary's North has indicated, he wants the public to understand that maintenance is a matter of great importance. Just last week, I'm told, a young lady who never really relied on the father for child support. Took care of a child, and the father wanted to see the child. She said, but look, you don't give me any money for my child support. You can come and get my child whenever you want. But I'm going to put my foot down. You must give me some sort of money weekly to take care of my child. The gentleman went to the court and asked for access. Not supporting the child, but he wants access. The judge quite correctly said, you want access to your father's role. Support your child, and you can have access to the child. The lady was quite willing to give the gentleman access to the child every other week. He called one day. The child was praying for examinations. She said, I'm sorry, but my son is praying for examination. You can't have him today. Who tell her to say that? What a ruckus. What a conduct. Imagine up. That is what this thing will prevent. I know. I know. I've seen a husband in your constituency who has the children on the road by himself because the mother has gone gallivanting, gets dressed up in the night, leave the children, and the guy has to walk with the children up and down Nutgrove Hill. So I know these things. Yeah, so thanks to the family court. So the court now would put equal responsibility on her. So if she thinks she's going to get away with it any longer, she has a sad mistake. Because all the father has to do is to take her before this court and tell this court that A, she is not playing the part of a parent. Because parenting is a two-way street. Mother and father together. Samantha will tell you, the member for St. Mary's South, and my friend from Brule East will tell you, that the main criteria for matters of the family is what is in the best interest of the child. Because you're a good father and you're a good parent. But people outside there, my friend, seem not to know what is going on. So I'm so happy, Mr. Speaker, and I'm making this public appeal to my colleague from St. Philip's South to make certain that the family court is ready. Antigua is being used as a model court for the entire sub-region. Let us get everything ready. So, Mr. Speaker, so we move on, sir. We look at Section 3, power to make rules. The minister may, subject to subsection 3, make rules to govern the practice and procedure to be observed in the court. What are these? Operating procedure of the court, the forms to be used in the court, setting of fees, security accepted in the court, holding of fines and fees, and so on. But subsection 3 is most important. My friend from St. Mary's North, you're also very keen about children and family. Your Christian beliefs come into play. Seventh-day Adventist is a fantastic church. The Chief Justice and any two other judges of this Supreme Court may make rules regulating the practice and procedure to be observed in the court, relating to the proceedings under any family law enactment. I said what they were. The rules made under this shall make provisions for, 1, the procedure to be followed in making any claim or application under any family law enactment. In other words, she'll set out how you come before the court, how the application is to be filed, what is required to bring the matter for the court's attention. Service of a claim or application, answering and replying to a claim or application. Mr. Speaker, you know, there are some fathers and some mothers who do everything to avoid service. You come to them, they walk away. And I'm certain that once you can read to the gentleman or to the lady, this is about Mr. Walker's child. Sorry, you wouldn't involve him, but about a particular child. You tell him what it's about, and he walks away, just drop it on the ground.
Long time me doing that.
You just drop it on the ground.
Just drop it on the ground.
That's right. Or you go to the house, you're not opening the door, you say, listen, I have a writ for you. So-and-so is the case, just leave it on the veranda. Nobody's there. You get a conspicuous place on the property, nearly done. We are going to make sure that families are kept together. The scientists have indicated, Samantha knows this very well, that the family is the cornerstone of society. And as such, it holds society together. So we will make certain that we bring back, my friend, it bothers my soul. We are becoming too Americanized, too modernized, too materialized. I went to home in my constituency, Mr. Speaker, 2 Sundays ago. And as I rapped on the door and opened, I was welcomed in by the mother. And there I was around the table, taking her breakfast from her plate and eating it whilst I'm talking to her. But imagine, not campaigning, visiting as usual. And Mr. Speaker, you know what I noticed? The father was before the television set, watching TV, American football and so on. The daughter was in the corner with this iPad, you know what I call them? Yeah. iPad. The other daughter was in the other room, over there, I could see her, on her telephone. No communication at all among them. No family interaction between them. As I sat speaking to the mother, her eyes were on the television set, because she has a TV set, just one thing there too. So I'm speaking to her, she's watching TV. It's wrong. Our society has gone to the dogs. I can remember, there were the days, you know, when grandmom was there to take care of the grandchildren, to keep the family together. These days, grandmas start from 35 upwards. And when you want to take kids to the grandmother, she's dressed to go out as well. So there's no family anymore. There's no family anymore. So we're hoping, Mr. Speaker, that we can get back that West Indian culture of the family, the love and respect. We have to think about that. We have to. The family is the cornerstone of society, and as such, we cannot do without it. So, Mr. Speaker, I want those young men and women to know that once you bring a child into the world, he wasn't asked to be born. You made him. You made her. You will be made to carry your responsibility, Mr. Speaker. And also, practice directions and guidelines. And, of course, that's what we are all about in the Antigua and Barbuda Labour Party and the government. So we are concerned, Mr. Speaker, with maintaining that fabric, that cement, that synergy, that togetherness, that love that permeates the soul of every family. Amen. Mr. Speaker, I ask, in the circumstances, that this bill be debated among my colleagues for its ultimate passage, Mr. Speaker.
Beg to second that, sir.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled the Magistrates' Code of Procedure Amendment Bill 2022 be read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The bill will now be read a second time.
An act to amend the Magistrates' Code of Procedure Act, Cap 255, and for other connected purposes.
The bill now stands referred to a committee of the whole. Sorry.
Mr. Speaker, I don't have much to say on this bill differently than I support it, and we within the United Progressive Party understand the importance of family, hence the reason why we have proposed the maintenance of minors policy, the MOM program, where we're looking to take it a step further to ensure that the child or children are taken care of, where we try to eliminate or prevent the father from going to jail as it relates to not working and cannot meet child maintenance. And from working, he will now have to pay back those monies once he gets a job so that, you know, the child can be maintained, so the mother win. The fact is, the child would not left to suffer, Mr. Speaker. So even in the event that the father decided that, listen, if the father decides that he is not willing to do anything, and efforts are made, Mr. Speaker, to get that person employed, and they refuse, then they go to jail. But if we can help, Mr. Speaker, to prevent the young men, because, Mr. Speaker, it goes back to a bill that we passed in this Honorable House in terms of rehabilitation. The rehabilitation bill that we did some time ago, where if we allow these individuals to continue, some cases are genuine cases, Mr. Speaker, and with that, if you allow them to go to prison, it simply means that it's going to continue to be a burden on the mother, because a father or the person that goes to jail cannot easily access a job because of a criminal record. So we have to take these things into consideration and look at how we work together as a society to ensure a win-win situation for all parties involved. So I'm not against the bill, Mr. Speaker. I think that, you know, the family court is important, and the fact that this is now, the rules are going to be the Chief Justice and two other judges are the ones that are going to be making the rules. We still have to look at certain aspects of the maintenance and access and revise some of these bills to ensure that they're fair. Because in some cases, fathers are trying. And based on the situation doesn't work out between you and the mother, they use the court as a means of getting after you. So it's not a one-size-fits-all, Mr. Speaker, but we have to look at the whole aspect of a family, as the AG mentioned, to see how we can come up with meaningful solutions to help us maintain the fabric of family and to strengthen our communities, Mr. Speaker. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I recognize St. Mary's South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'll just be brief. I do lend my full support to this bill. But, Mr. Speaker, I note that the leader of the opposition would have primarily looked at it from the aspect of maintenance of children. Family court is much more than that, Mr. Speaker. And the reality is, Mr. Speaker, we have a lot of issues within family structures, communities, that young people do not know how to express themselves and find themselves sometimes on the wrong side of the law. The family court will address matters of that nature also. And I think what is very critical, and I know that it is something that the Honorable Member for St. George has already championed before the cabinet, to ensure that there is a proper counseling support for persons who require counseling. And the reality is, Mr. Speaker, and Mr. Speaker, I share this because it is always etched in my mind that persons just cannot cope sometimes. I remember when I came out as a young lawyer practicing, there was a mother who had recently separated from her partner, and she had a young son who resided with her, but clearly she was having some issues in coping. The father was not living up to his responsibility, and I don't just mean supporting, I meant being a father, being there to give the support, to give guidance. And she became very frustrated. The child did a simple act which annoyed the mother, and I recall that she used a hot spoon and placed it on his face as he slept. I remember that case. And she cried so much after she realized what had happened, that she begged the father to take the child from her, to allow her an opportunity. And I gave her support then of being able to go to counseling so that she could have that opportunity of getting to put her feet back on the ground and understand exactly what was happening. And I say this to say that sometimes as adults, we do not know how to channel our anger, how to deal with our frustrations, and we take them out on our children. Another thing of concern I see is young children who should be in primary school are on the street all hours of night, like they have no one. We see increased cases of young people not showing up at home. The family perhaps having some idea that they've had this repeated situation. They don't say anything until 2-3 days down the road they see the child don't show up anywhere. This cannot continue in this small society. Our young ladies, and we would have heard cases of 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds. Mr. Speaker, come on. And people will say, oh, it's been happening all the time. That is not acceptable. So the structure of the family court has to be one to heal the family and to bring the family back together. I recall in this very house I said some years ago, what is missing is that nuclear family structure. Everybody gets big, everybody wants their own home, everybody moves out of a community, there's no more connection. We can't continue this way. I remember my mother indicating to me that she attended TOR. My mother was born in Crab Hill. On the weekdays that she had school, she had a mother in town, so to speak. As a matter of fact, it was Sir Viv Richards' mom who was her town mother at the time. And then in the weekends, they made sure she went home. I mean, that was a level of involvement, that commitment. And we don't have it anymore. I doubt that we're going to get it back to that, but I think it is critical that we have certain structures in place, such as the family court, such as Family and Social Services Division, to give that support where it lacks. Mr. Speaker, if you will allow me, when I looked at, I can't see now that I get older, need my glasses. When I looked at Clause 3, Sub-Clause 6, and I saw the listing of what related to the family court, I just want clarification, and AG, you know I've been out of practice since 2014, so you probably can assist, but I would have thought that matters pertaining to marital affairs, where the wife may get allowance, may apply to the magistrate's court. They may be through a legal separation, and she collects a maintenance fee through the magistrate's court. I would think that would fall under family affairs, but I am guided because, as I said, I have not been in the system to that extent. Yeah, but there used to be a situation where when the wife applies for maintenance for the child, she could also apply for herself. Or there are some women who simply do not want the divorce and they apply at the magistrate's court for maintenance. So that is the aspect that I'm speaking in relation to. But I commend the Attorney General's Office and the Ministry of Social Transformation because I think this is a step that is necessary. We need to create that environment to deal with family matters. I actually had the opportunity of visiting the family court in Trinidad and Tobago. The setup is not as ideal as they would like, but what you gathered from how the court was set up was that it allowed for a more comfortable environment, so persons didn't feel that they were being punished if they were there for related to criminal matters, and the men who were there to deal with the issue of support, that they felt comfortable to speak. But I want to say to the, before I say it, to the honorable member, the leader of opposition, honorable member for All Saints East and St. Luke, you can come with all kind of cotton candy to offer the public. But the reality is, as individuals, once we become parents, once we are adults, we have a responsibility in society. It is wrong for any political party to try to develop programs or to give that kind of candy to people without them understanding their responsibility, the role they have, not just the development of a family, but development of a society. If a child sees their parent relying on welfare, what then is the inspiration for that child to educate, to be educated, and to understand that they have a role to play? We are the examples. We are the examples. Our children become who we show them they should be. And children should always aspire to be better than their parents. With that said, let us be careful with what we offer as cotton candy, and let us offer things of substance that will help to mold a better society. Thank you.
No, I'm not going to be long, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to lend my support to this bill and to commend the Legal Affairs Department for recognizing that there is a major issue that has to be dealt with and has to be looked at by allowing the family court to be operationalized so that some of these issues can be dealt with. Now, Mr. Speaker, I won't be long. I just wanted just to stress, as was previously mentioned by other speakers, the importance of a family. And clearly, when you look at what's happening in Antigua and Barbuda today, Mr. Speaker, we are at a place where we must address the situation, or else we're going to end up in a rabbit hole. And you look at Antigua and Barbuda, especially the youngsters, and I want to address one particular issue, not been very long with it. And I think it's a misnomer and a misunderstanding, because I've heard it and seen parents in Antigua have spoken about it. And that is, Mr. Speaker, we came to this parliament, I would think in good faith, to decriminalize marijuana. No, this is what I'm saying. That's what we came here to do. But I think there's a misconception with a lot of people as to the difference between decriminalization and the legal use of marijuana. Bear me out, Member for City West. All right? It seemed to be a serious misunderstanding of what that means. And so what you find happening, and I want to be very frank, is that youngsters in our primary school and our secondary school have been exposed to this notion that they're allowed to have, whether it's 4 plants or 5 plants, or put it simply, that they're allowed to smoke marijuana as they wish. I've seen it in Barbuda. I've seen it here. As a matter of fact, I was by the Treasury about 2 months ago, and a person was waiting there, and we had a conversation. And he said that he's so concerned for his primary student, his son, that he ensures that when the school time has ended, he's there to pick him up so that he doesn't get involved in peer pressure in doing smoking cannabis. And I'm saying to this Honorable House that we must address that issue. That issue is a serious issue. I'm not pointing fingers at any single persons, Mr. AG, but I don't know what can be done, whether age limit can be put on that situation where everybody just feel that they legally can have a spliff or 2 spliffs or whatever, that some sort of monitoring be done around our learning institutions,
because this thing is not only affecting 16 and 17-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds. How can they manage that, Mr. Speaker? How can a brain developing at that stage deal with that situation? If we don't address the situation, we're going to end up with a lost generation. Because, Mr. Speaker, it's the in thing. I mean, I'm quite sure we're all members of Parliament. We go to our constituencies and go around the blocks and so on. It is something that I think we need to deal with. And at the end of the day, all this will help, Mr. Speaker, in bringing back that kind of control, that kind of self-worth, that type of ambitious behavior that is required. Because again, it takes a parent to raise a child, but a child must also be in an environment that's conducive to accept the teachings of his or her parent. All right? And so that is a concern that I have, Mr. Speaker. It is something that I think has to be addressed. I think we have time to address it. Mr. AG, I suggest that we look at that situation in terms of what we did, in terms of whether or not we can put an age limit on that, whether or not even around the schools until it's under control. Because, Mr. Speaker, and to be frank, we have youngsters smoking marijuana in school. I've had complaints that they're in the bathroom at lunchtime, at break time, because that's what it is, actually smoking marijuana. All right? So, yes, I supported the bill because I think we're at that stage where, you know, we have to be a bit liberal with certain things, but we cannot allow it to negatively impact our youngsters. And what I've been told by doctors, at least by 2 doctors, is that at 13, 14, even 15 years old, your brain is not in the position to manage, position is not the right word, but your brain cannot constantly deal with that type of situation. Was it TLC? Right. THC, all right? So, Mr. Speaker, again, in supporting the bill, let's look at the holistic approach with this situation. Let's try and get our youngsters off the street. Let's try and get them constructively engaged, because that is important, through sports, through family programs, community programs, educational programs, extracurricular activities that can help build this society. Because, Mr. Speaker, when we're gone and when we're off the scenes, and we would have neglected that, they would not have good things to say about us. And I'm quite sure all of us have seen it. It is something that people ask me to come to the Parliament to speak about. But I think the time has come for us to deal with it in a real practical way. Mr. AG, again, a good move. I hope you can get it going, because again, it kind of streamline these kind of cases in a particular way, and I think it will be more efficient for the system for us to have a dedicated family court rather than dealing with it through thing. So, fortunately, you have my full support, and the Parliament has my full support in this one. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what must not be lost, even though we are discussing one aspect of the government's response to the social challenges in Antigua and Barbuda, an important aspect, and that is to use the institution of the court in order to respond to the social challenges we face. Mr. AG, let me say publicly in this Honorable House that I must commend you and your staff for bringing this important amendment to this Honorable House. You know, for years I've been concerned about the social deterioration of young people, the deviancy that we see. But I just want the country to have a picture of what's happening. We are seeing the rolling out of the architecture of this government to respond to the social challenges of this society. Earlier, in my earlier presentation, I spoke about early childhood education. These things are all tied together. It is a plan. You have the early childhood education, and by the way, all these things have the component of health. The Ministry of Health is interested in early childhood education from many ways, but in particular, the issue of nutrition. The issue of nutrition is a big challenge. If you do not have the right nutrition, the brain will not develop. And if your brain does not develop, it retards you from being able to absorb knowledge. And that's part of the problem. Many of our youngsters have come out of an environment where their brains are not well developed. And so it's difficult for them to learn, to understand concepts. And you talk to some of these young men and you'll see. And the fact is, Mr. Speaker, we can't always blame them. Because we are supposed to be responsible. Exactly, a product of the environment. And you're likely to find that with this court, what I like about this court and the magistrates, which and will split the responsibility with the AG's office, who will take care of all the paperwork and the procedures, the condition of the court, the magistrates then will have to consider social intervention. And here is where the Ministry of Social Transformation comes in, because many of these cases, and we have now to think of how we build the different institutions to work together to save this generation. And the youth training, even ABIS. You take, for instance, ABIS, the role of ABIS. Is what, right. It's one thing to say to young people, go get a job. But if they don't have the skills, it makes it difficult. So we have to bring them in. ABIS is one aspect of it. And then, if they're academically inclined, then we now have our state college and our university. But you made reference to something called MOM. Is that what you called it, MOM? Let me explain something to you, and I'm going to take my time. For you to see and for the whole country to see the games that are played in the minds of the people of this country. I have here, UPP pledges social fund for single mothers. And I'm going to read it. Listen carefully. Thousands of single mothers across the country could be in some much needed help, with the United Progressive Party, UPP, planning to introduce a social fund for them should the party be elected at the polls. I'm going to go to a later paragraph, it's the fifth paragraph. And within 100 days of a UPP administration, we are going to put a minimum of $1 million in that fund. And we are going to organize the program so that where you have a father who is not working, who is doing his best but simply can't make it, the mothers can draw from the fund for you for the benefit of the child. It says thousands of mothers. And you are going to put aside $1 million. If you give each mother $1,000, if you divide the $1 million by the 1,000 mothers, it's 1,000, I'm sorry. If you divide the $1 million by 1,000 mothers, it's $1,000. So people hear the million, but how can you take care of a child with $1,000? This is what you call pure deception and snake oil. No, it's not that. You are missing the point. You can't come up. The thing that is happening here, you accept that there were thousands of mothers
Leader of the
who have the
opposition,
problem.
please. It's getting late. We've got to get on with it. The
They say
crosstalk
that
has
there are
got to be eliminated.
thousands of mothers. There are thousands of mothers. It says here. And this is the problem. You must do your research. When you come and make these public statements, you must understand there are people who will analyze them. Mr. Speaker, the UPP is saying to the mothers of this country, and we saw the mothers, there are mothers who have challenges with getting payment for their children. No doubt about that. But his solution, which is really addressing the symptoms of the problem, that's the symptoms, not the real root cause. Because I have difficulty to understand why a man would make a child and turn his back. That couldn't happen to me. So that man who turns his back on his child has a deeper problem. That is the problem we have to address. If we don't address that problem in it fundamentally, then this is no solution. If you accept that there are thousands of mothers who have, say, one child, and that child is not being supported by the father, and you set up $1 million revolving fund, when the mother hears $1 million revolving fund all out there, they're going to think of plenty of money. But if you divide the $1 million by 1,000, each mother gets only 1,000. What can 1,000 do? What can 1,000 if you have 3 children? This is snake oil, and you all must stop it. It not bother me. I just destroyed it. I just destroyed the logic. Read it. I just destroyed the logic. It takes more than $1,000 per mother to meet the requirements of even food. When you go around the constituency, you hear and you give support. I have just destroyed that nonsense that you all are putting. So, Mr. Speaker, no, I will not deceive them. No, you seem to be hurt. I just destroyed that.
I've
I have
spoken
said
to
the
you
mothers,
kindly
don't believe it.
I don't want to hear you
Yeah.
with the political crowd.
No.
We're debating. There are other bills to be done.
Yes.
This is the end of it. You can quarrel with him on A&R, Real News, Captain Corner. I don't give a you-know-what.
Mr. Speaker,
But
I am going to
in
end.
here, I don't want to hear you again. Unless
I
it's
am going to
unless it's a
end by
point
saying
of order.
this. I am going to end, Mr. Speaker, by saying this. It takes more than $1 million to provide social outreach to mothers and children. And you are seeing $1 million as a major step. If you see what this government spends, see what this government spends in social intervention, and tens of millions of dollars on a regular basis. And I'm sure the Minister for Social Transformation will disclose what the government is spending right now. But what I am saying, we must not address this issue to dig at the nerves of these mothers, to make them feel that there is this grand hope of $1 million revolving fund. And the last point I'll make is that to address this issue, it must be done in the context of institution. You have to institutionalize the process, not to just come and throw money. For instance, when you have the family court, there are a variety of issues that will come to each family. And what has to happen, each family issue must be analyzed on its own merit. You can't have one solution fits all the problems. And you can't assume that the only thing that will fix a social problem is money. It takes more than that. It takes other interventions, Mr. Speaker. The church has to be involved. There was a time when the church played a role. It takes the village to raise a child. And these simplistic announcements, revolving fund of $1 million. Oh, that is misleading, Mr. Speaker. The problem is far more complex than that. And what this government is doing is building institutional capacity to deal with the social ills of the society for which we all are culpable. And we must begin now to change it around, both government And opposition must understand the challenge, because if it's one thing that can undermine our development is the social issues of this society. They are very costly. It has been shown in other countries. And if we don't make the interventions quickly as we are today, then these problems will become burdensome to the point that they overtake us. Other societies in the Caribbean, I wouldn't name any, just scout the Caribbean, and you can see already they are too late to turn it around. Antigua must not be late. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
My heart and soul have become unshackled by the statements made today in this House. Mr. Speaker, it's obvious that we as parliamentarians understand our responsibility. I'm very happy that the members of the opposition have seen the light, the dawn of the new day. They, Mr. Speaker, have caught the vision, and therefore they will live the dream of having families being dealt with as they ought properly to, the dream that we can build a society that's concentrated upon the family as being the cornerstone of society, the dream that at long last we have institutions established in the state to ensure that all family matters holistically are and will be dealt with. The contributions of all my colleagues have been good today. Members of Ward St. St. Luke's, from Barbuda, my friend from St. Mary's North and South, respectively, Mr. Speaker, have all demonstrated that caring that's required, that caring which is necessary for putting this thing together. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to state to this nation as well, it was only last week that this government passed the necessary financial provisions for the first judge to come here to start her things in July. Substantial outlay we've made to make this thing possible. So you see, yes, it's a part of a plan, Pringle, my friend from All Saints East. It's part of a plan to restructure Antigua, a structured program to develop and to change our society, because we understand that except this society is changed now, as you said, my friend from Barbuda, we will lose a generation. And that's what we're trying to avoid now. So let us gird our loins, Mr. Prime Minister, and join the battle. And let us make certain that this is the dawn, in the words of Mighty Swallow, of a new day. It gives me great pleasure, Mr. Speaker, to ask that this bill be sent to the committee to be considered clause by clause.
Okay, sorry. It has been moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled the Magistrates Code of Procedure Amendment Bill 2022 be read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The bill will now be read a second time.
An act to amend the Magistrates Code of Procedure Act, Cap 255, and for other connected purposes.
The bill now stands referred to a committee of the whole House to be considered clause by clause.
Clause 1, short title.
The question is that clause 1, the short title, do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 2, interpretation.
Question is that clause 2, interpretation, do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 3, amendment of section 250, power to make rules.
The question is that clause 3, amendment of section 250, power to make rules, do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
I was, just one thing, AG, on the 6, where I asked about the issue of marital maintenance.
Yes, under the Act itself, the Maritime Code Procedure Act, there's a section that speaks about marriage. So that is already covered in the Act as it now stands.
Okay.
Question is that the enactment do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
The title.
The question is that the title do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. House will now resume its sitting. Honorable Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to report that the bill shortly entitled the Magistrates Court of Procedure Amendment Bill 2022 has passed through the committee, Mr. Speaker, without amendments. I move the adoption of the report of the committee on the bill, Mr. Speaker.
It has been moved and seconded that the report of the committee on the Magistrates Code of Procedure Amendment Bill 2022 be adopted. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
And Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the bill shortly entitled the Magistrates Court of Procedure Amendment Bill 2022 be read a third time and passed.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled the Magistrates Code of Procedure Amendment Bill 2022 be read a third time and passed. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The bill will now be read a third time.
An act to amend the Magistrates Code of Procedure Act, Cap 255, and for other connected purposes.
The bill has been read a third time and passed accordingly. No, hold on, ma'am. Before, just one more time. Honorable Attorney General, at this point in the proceedings, could you inform me, apart from the motion, which is probably of utmost importance, which other bills you consider?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we'll have to do the company matter then.
What's that?
No, it's importance. It's our priority now, not shortness.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, the PM is quite correct. If you're going to ask me to bring one more bill and a motion, it would have to be the company's bill, Mr. Prime Minister.
And which is the company's amendment bill?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Fair enough.
Sorry, Sam. Okay. So we'll go PM.
Mr.
Prime
Speaker,
Minister.
thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, we will try to be very efficient with our time. We recognize that it's now almost 5:30, so I'll be as succinct as possible. And I take this opportunity to move the second and third readings for the bill shortly entitled the Companies Amendment Bill of 2012. Mr. Speaker, we're making some amendments to the Companies Act of 1995. And one of the main objectives here is to increase the efficiency and the ease of doing business. So, for example, insofar as the filing of annual returns are concerned, whereas the current Act calls for companies to file by the 1st of April, we're now amending it to allow them to file annually or within 30 days after their registration, or if they would have had a certificate of continuance. And this in itself will ease the burden on the Intellectual Property Office rather than having practically most of the companies filing at the same time at the end of March by the 1st of April. So that in itself will reduce the backlog that will arise from time to time. We also have a section that we're amending here, Mr. Speaker, that requires IBCs, that is international business corporations that are doing business locally, to register their beneficial owners, and or those who exercise control over the company. That particular provision is covered in clause 344, clause 6, section 344A, and the requirements under this particular clause, Mr. Speaker, calls for a certificate of authorization from the Financial Services Regulatory Authority, a statement containing 1, the name of the company, the date of its incorporation, 3, particulars of its corporate instruments for the extent, if any, to which the liability of the shareholders or members of the company is limited, 5, the business that a company will carry on within the jurisdiction of Antigua and Barbuda, 6, the date on which the company intends to commence trading or the provision of services within the jurisdiction of Antigua and Barbuda. We move from 6, 7. The shares that the company is authorized to issue and their nominal or par value, if any. 8, the full address of the registered office of the company in Antigua and Barbuda. 9, the name, address, and occupation of the resident agent of the company. And it also goes on to say in subclause 2 that the statement or the subsection 1 shall be accompanied by a statutory declaration by a director or officer of the company that verifies on behalf of the company that the particulars set out in the statement are true and correct. B, a copy of the corporate instrument of the company. C, a statutory declaration by an attorney at law that this section has been complied with. D, an attestation to the beneficial ownership and control of the company. Now, this is very important, Mr. Speaker. As part of our international obligations, we are not allowed to have shell companies. We would have dealt with that before, but we also have to have provisions in the laws of Antigua and Barbuda to prevent the substantial or beneficial owners of companies to hide behind nominal directors. So this requirement here to allow for the certification of the beneficial ownership, or those who, if they do not own, at least exercise control of the company, that there should be a certification to that effect. That is a very important provision in the law, and not only to ensure that we protect our jurisdiction, but at the same time to ensure that we're in full compliance with international standards, especially under the Common Reporting Standard. On the E, it speaks to a certificate of good standing from the Financial Services Regulatory Commission, which is already in place. And on the clause 3, it says that all rules, or subclause 3 rather, all rules and regulations applicable to an external company shall be applicable to a company registered under the International Business Corporations Act that has been registered under this act. So again, as I said before, you do have IBCs that are conducting business locally, and they would have registered under the Companies Act and are therefore subjected to these provisions, especially the declaration of the beneficial owners of the company, so that no one can hide behind nominal directors or to operate a company fictitiously. Mr. Speaker, there's also an amendment on the clause 7B that says here that the service of processing all suits and proceedings by or against an external company that is also a company registered on the International Business Corporations Act, and all lawful notices to the company shall be done at the registered office of the company unless an alternate address for service has been provided in the court documents issued by the company. So again, another amendment that we've made. And on the 8th, it speaks to returns, and it says here that the director or officer of the external company shall certify the contents of any return made on this section, and that the registrar may levy a penalty against the external company or strike the external company off the register of external companies if it neglects or refuses to file a return required under this section. And on the 9, it speaks to a penalty. 9, clause 9, subclause 3, it says here that if a company fails to comply with subsection 1, the company shall pay to the registrar a penalty of $100 for late filing thereafter. The registrar shall levy on the company, $100 for every 90 days or part thereof during which the company remains in default. And again, if they fail to comply, they can be struck off, or alternatively, the registrar has the discretion under subclause 4 to reinstate the company if they pay up all of the prescribed fees and are fully compliant. The final amendment is covered under clause 11, Mr. Speaker, in which, where the company files for a reorganization, they have deemed that the present provision in which we are allowing for about 180 days is insufficient, and therefore it needs to be extended. So in subsection 5, we're repealing the words 18 months and replacing the word with the words, or the words with the words 24 months. So from 18 to 24 months. In subsection 6, repealing the words 20 months and replacing this with the words 30 months. Again, allowing for adequate time for filing and for the for putting together an organization or reorganizational plan in the event a company files for reorganization or restructuring under the Companies Act. Mr. Speaker, again, this is to ensure the efficacious application of this section of the Act and to ensure that we put systems in place to increase our standing in doing business assessments that are done from time to time, and just generally to make sure that business operations here are seamless under the Companies Act of Antigua and Barbuda. Mr. Speaker, I recommend these amendments to this Honourable House for its consideration. All right, Mr. Speaker, in the interest of time, there be no debate. I recommend that this bill be sent to a committee of the whole House to be considered clause by clause.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill shortly entitled the Companies Amendment Bill 2022 be read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The bill will now be read a second time.
An act to amend the Companies Act 1995, number 18 of 1995, and for other connected purposes.
The bill now stands referred to a committee of the whole House to be considered clause by clause. What do we... After this? So we do the motion? After the other one? All right, let's go.
Clause 1, short title.
The question is Clause 1, the short title to stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 2, interpretation.
The question is that Clause 2, interpretation, do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 3, amendment of Section 194, annual returns by a company incorporated under the Companies Act.
The question is that Clause 3, amendment of Section 194, annual returns by a company incorporated under the Companies Act. 4, whatever, do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye.
Clause 4, amendment of Section 194A, annual attestation on beneficial ownership and control of a company.
The question is that Clause 4, amendment of Section 194A, annual attestation or beneficial ownership and control of a company, do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 5, amendment of Section 344, registering external companies.
Question is Clause 5, amendment of Section 344, registering external companies to stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 6, insertion of Section 344A, registering a company incorporated under the International Business Corporations Act, Cap 222, as an external company.
The question is Clause 6, insertion of Section 344A, registering a company incorporated under the International Business Corporations Act, Cap 222, as an external company to stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 7, amendment of Section 346, attorney of company.
The question is Clause 7, amendment of Section 346, attorney of company to stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 8, amendment of Section 356, returns.
The question is Clause 8, amendment of Section 356, returns. Do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 9, insertion of Section 356B, annual attestation by a registered external company.
The question is at Clause 9, insertion of Section 356B, annual attestation by a registered external company. Do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 10, amendment of Section 543, definition of technical words.
The question is Clause 10, amendment of Section 543, definition of technical words. Do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 11, amendment of Section 598.
The question is at Clause 11, amendment of Section 598. Who may file a plan to stand part of the bill? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
The enacting clause.
The question is the enacting clause to stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
The title.
The question is that the title to stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The House now resumes its sitting.
Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to report that the bill shortly entitled the Companies Amendment Bill of 2022 has passed to the committee stage without amendment. I move the adoption of the report of the committee on the bill.
Second motion, Mr. Speaker.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled the Companies Amendment Bill 2022 should be read a third time and pass. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The bill will now be read a third time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the bill shortly entitled Companies Bill 2022, or the Companies Amendment Bill 2022, be read a third time and passed.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled the Companies Amendment Bill 2022 be read a third time and passed. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The bill will now be read a third time.
An act to amend the Companies Act 1995, number 18 of 1995, and for other connected purposes.
The bill has been read a third time and passed accordingly.
Mr. Speaker. He told me to go ahead. Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, I have to get the bill out. Social protection, is that it? I recognize the member for St. George.
Mr. Speaker, I move the suspension of Standing Orders 63 and 59A to enable the bill shortly entitled Social Protection Amendment Bill 2022 be read a second time.
It's been moved and seconded
Okay.
that the Standing Orders 59A and 63 be suspended to enable the House to proceed with the second and third readings of the bill shortly entitled Social Protection Amendment Bill 2022. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Which one is that? Okay. Okay. Mr. Speaker, the objects and reasons of this bill. J. Subject to the approval of the honourable members. The honourable member. Which one? AG. Okay, let me follow my then. AG. I beg to move the second reading of the bill, shortly entitled the Social Protection Amendment Bill. The objects of this bill and the reasons are that there was a slight anomaly in the legislation, and we are seeking to correct it by allowing the cabinet to appoint the chairperson of the board. And that essentially is what this is about. All boards are appointed by cabinet, all members are appointed by cabinet, and this is really just a minor correction to the anomaly in the bill to allow the cabinet to appoint the chairperson. I beg to... Yeah. Where do I go from here? Yes, sir. I recommend the amendment to the Honourable House for its consideration. Thank you.
I wish to second that motion, Mr. Speaker, and reserve the right to speak.
Mr. Speaker, I recommend this bill to the Honourable House, clause by clause, to the Committee of the Whole House, clause by clause. Thank you.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill shortly entitled Social Protection Amendment Bill 2022 be read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The bill will now be read a second time.
An act to amend the Social Protection Act 2020, number 22 of 2020.
The bill will now, The bill now stands referred to a committee of the whole House to be considered clause by clause.
Clause 1, short title.
The question is, Clause 1, the short title, to stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 2, interpretation.
The question is that Clause 2, interpretation, to stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 3, amendment of Section 39, composition of the Commission.
The question is that Clause 3, amendment of Section 39, composition of the Commission, do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
The enacting clause.
The question is that enacting clause to stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
The title.
The question is that the title to stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Yeah. House now resumes its sitting.
Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to report that the bill shortly entitled the Social Protection Amendment Bill 2022 has passed through the committee stage without amendment.
Is your microphone on?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I move the adoption of the report of the committee on the bill.
It has been moved and seconded that the report of the committee on the bill Social Protection Amendment Bill 2022 be adopted. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker,
Move on. You're good.
I beg to move that the bill shortly entitled the Social Protection Amendment Bill 2022 be read a third time and passed.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled the Social Protection Amendment Bill 2022 be read a third time and passed. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The bill will now be read a third time.
An act to amend the Social Protection Act 2020, number 22 of 2020.
The bill, the bill has been read a third time and passed accordingly. I recognize the Mayor South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to move the suspension of Standing Order 59A and 60, subsection 3, to enable the House to proceed with the second and third readings of the following bill to enact shortly entitled the Pesticides and Toxic Chemicals Control Amendment Bill of 2022.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So moved.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to move the second and third readings of the following bill for an act shortly entitled Pesticides and Toxic Chemicals Control Amendment Bill of 2022. Mr. Speaker, I will not keep the House long. This is simply an amendment which is indicated at Clause 3 of the bill to allow for the status of the bill of the board to change so that it can now be a body corporate and allowing it to have more management of its own affairs. Mr. Speaker, given the importance of food security, this is indeed a necessary step for us to take at this time. There'll be no debate. I'm very happy that everyone takes food security seriously. And so I now ask, Mr. Speaker, that the said bill be committed to the whole House to be considered clause by clause.
Madam Chair, Madam Clerk, please go.
Clause 1, short title.
Question is that Clause 1 is short title to stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 2, interpretation.
The question is that Clause 2, interpretation, to stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 3, amendment of Section 3, establishment and constitution of the board.
Question is that Clause 3, amendment of Section 3, establishment and constitution of the board will stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
The enacting clause.
Question is an enacted clause will stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
The title.
Question is that the title will stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. House will now resume its sitting.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to report that the bill shortly entitled the Pesticides and Toxic Chemicals Control Amendment Bill of 2022 has passed through the committee stage without amendment. I move the adoption of the report of the committee on the bill.
It has been moved and seconded the report of the committee on the bill, Pesticides and Toxic Chemicals Control Amendment Bill 2022 be adopted. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the bill shortly entitled the Pesticides and Toxic Chemicals Control Amendment Bill of 2022 be read a third time and passed accordingly.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled the Pesticides and Toxic Chemicals Control Amendment Bill 2022 be read a third time and passed. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it, and the bill will now be read a third time.
An act to amend the Pesticides and Toxic Chemicals Control Act, number 12 of 2008.
The bill has been read a third time and passed accordingly.
Yeah, the gavel, bang. Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the Prime Minister.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Speaker, I'll read this self-explanatory motion into the minutes of this Honorable House. So I start by moving the following resolution, a resolution of the House of Representatives authorizing the government of Antigua and Barbuda to borrow the sum of $4,695,000 United States dollars from the Caribbean Development Bank, the CDB, for the purpose of funding the strengthening, resilience, and supporting recovery in Antigua and Barbuda COVID-19 Health Response Project. Whereas Section 47 of the Finance Administration Act of 2006, number 3 of 2006, provides that no money shall be raised on the credit of the government except under the authority of an Act of Parliament or resolution of the House. And whereas the Cabinet of Antigua and Barbuda at its meeting held on the 20th of April 2022 approved the borrowing from the Caribbean Development Bank, hereinafter called the bank, of the sum of US $4,695,000 at a variable interest rate of 2.08% per annum, repayable over a period of 15 years, inclusive of a grace period of 3 years, for the purpose of funding the strengthening, resilience, and supporting recovery in Antigua and Barbuda COVID-19 Health Response Project, which has been facilitated through the Inter-American Development Bank Global Loan Program to build health, social, and economic resilience in OACS member territories. And whereas the Financial Secretary for Antigua and Barbuda, on behalf of the Government of Antigua and Barbuda, executed an agreement for the said loan on the 29th day of April 2022, the terms of which are attached to this resolution as a schedule. And whereas by Section 47 of the Finance Administration Act of 2006, such borrowing must receive the approval of this Honorable House. Now, therefore, be it resolved by this Honorable House that pursuant to Sections 47 of the Finance Administration Act of 2006, number 23 of 2006, that this Honorable House approves the borrowing by the Government of Antigua and Barbuda of the sum of $4,695,000 from the Caribbean Development Bank for the purpose of financing the strengthening, resilience, and supporting recovery in Antigua and Barbuda COVID-19 Health Response Project on the terms and conditions set out in the loan number 30/SFR-ANT loan agreement between the Caribbean Development Bank as a lender and the Government of Antigua and Barbuda as a borrower, and dated the 29th day of April 2022, a copy of which is attached hereto as a schedule. Mr. Speaker, I recommend this resolution to this Honorable House.
Second the motion.
Now, therefore, be it resolved by this Honorable House that pursuant to Section 47 of the Finance Administration Act 2006, number 23 of 2006, that this Honorable House approves the borrowing by the Government of Antigua and Barbuda of the sum of US $4,695,000 from the Caribbean Development Bank for the purpose of financing the, quote, strengthening resilience and supporting recovery in Antigua and Barbuda COVID-19 Health Response Project, unquote, on the terms and conditions set out in loan number 30/SFR-ANT SFR-ANT loan agreement between the Caribbean Development Bank and the government of Antigua and Barbuda, the lender as the lender, and the government of Antigua and Barbuda as the borrower, and dated the 29th of April 2022, a copy of which is attached hereto as a schedule. Will there be any debate? There better not be.
Mr. Speaker, is nothing wrong, Mr. Speaker, but it's just for clarification, Mr. Speaker.
Go right ahead.
Because it would have already agreed to. They're just bringing it here because it has to. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm not clear, Mr. Speaker. I know that the resolution speaks to the strengthening the resilience and supporting recovery in Antigua and Barbuda COVID-19 health response project. I would just like for when the member for City West gets up to speak, to give us a little bit more details as to what these monies are geared towards, so that we can be clear as to the reason for this borrowing. Because it don't make no sense we oppose at this point, because they're already borrowing. But we just need to know exactly what it is these monies, so that we can hold them accountable for the monies they're borrowing for us to repay.
All right, Mr. Speaker. A very appropriate question from the member from Austin Season, St. Luke. Mr. Speaker, we intend to further build out our health infrastructure. So, for example, we'll be establishing a renal unit at the old Halberton Hospital site that is currently under construction, and we hope to utilize some of these funds to complete that facility. In addition, we'll be establishing a cardiac unit at Mount St. John. We are currently in discussions with a well-known medical facility in the United States to have a joint program with them, a partnership, to establish a cardiac unit here in Antigua and Barbuda. So most of these funds will be utilized primarily for the purpose of expanding or further expanding our health facilities as we seek to bring first world health standards to the people of Antigua and Barbuda, or healthcare standards to the people of Antigua and Barbuda. So that is it in a nutshell, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for St. St. Luke for his appropriate question.
Moving right along. On the terms and conditions set out in loan number 30/SFR-ANT loan agreement between the Caribbean Development Bank as the lender and the government of Antigua and Barbuda as the borrower, and dated the 29th of April 2022, a copy of which is attached hereto as a schedule. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it, and the motion is passed.
Government business, committee business, private members' business.
Mr. Speaker,
Attorney General.
it's now left to me, Mr. Speaker, after a very long day and healthy debates in this House.
I had noticed.
To move a motion, Mr. Speaker, that this honorable House. Oh yes, Mr. Speaker, I must commend you too, sir. You spoke to me this morning before you took your seat and indicated exactly what your plans were. Notice, sir, it's exactly 1 minute past 6. And you gave strict instructions, you will not be here after 6. So, Mr. Speaker,
But great resilience.
great resilience
No,
for you,
that's a
sir.
standing rule. You know. I didn't tell you that. That's a standing rule.
Yes.
I understand that the parliament before you said
Yes.
at 11 o'clock and 12 o'clock and them foolishness. So I don't know what they were doing all day. You understand?
Yes.
But not me. We're going to do the business by 6 o'clock.
The member forward said for City West indicating you are an octogenarian in the best of health. Not many persons who are over 80 years old could do what you're doing, sir.
Well, once we have the deputy, you know, and I can get a break here and there, it's not a problem. But you do get tired if you're the only one and your voice goes. You know?
Yes. But, Mr. Speaker?
But I'm a strong 80.
Yes, that you doing very, very well, sir.
God's grace.
Somebody's indicated, sir, you should join the West Indies team, sir. Because they need guys like to make some runs for them. So, Mr. Speaker, it gives me the great pleasure to ask that this House be adjourned, sign the die, and to give notice. We'll be back in here within 14 days. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
It's been moved and seconded that this honorable House be adjourned. Sign a die. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. I will come work and give all this stuff right there. This stuff is